Chapter 3398. Jade Archive. Xiao Hua was even more surprised. If Xiao Bai's soul cultivation had improved, Xiao Bai would definitely not be so excited. There must be some kind of mutation in the ninth heaven of Ling Yuan. When Jade Archive, Xiao Hua flew into the mysterious dark clouds. The lightning on the surface of the dark clouds flashed, and the broken threads also swayed. The difference was that Xiao Hua deliberately avoided the aura of desolation, but it still uncontrollably attacked Jade Archive, Xiao Hua. Of course, Jade Archive, Xiao Hua did not care about these attacks at this time. His figure disappeared into the mysterious dark clouds. When he flew into the Immerse sky, he saw that the whole Immerse sky was brilliant. Thousands of green seal characters sometimes gathered and sometimes dissipated. When they dissipated, each green seal character was like a speck of particles. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning swayed between these particles. When they gathered, they emitted a power that shook the earth and mountains. The huge mountains and rivers were faintly discernible, just like a boundless world. Good. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua could not help but praise, looking up at the sky above the Immerse sky. Previously, Xiao Bai had said that there was a seal on the upper level of the Immerse sky, which made Xiao Hua depressed for a long time. Later, Xiao Bai said that he was wrong. Now, it seemed that Xiao Bai must have made a new discovery. When the Jade Archive, Xiao Hua flew past the countless soul threads that resembled a jade green ocean, an incomparably huge dragon body was coiled in the sky above the jade green ocean. Above the jade green ocean, there was an enormous grayish-black dark cloud that was as heavy as a mountain. This dark cloud seemed to be connected to the surface of the mysterious dark cloud. There was lightning and broken threads. The only thing missing was the heavenly runes and earth deed of the heavenly might. These dark clouds were also like solidified waves. A terrifying aura was emitted from the inside. Even Jade Archive Xiao Hua could not help but feel a chill. Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at the dark clouds with some surprise. This should be the fifth layer of the ninth heaven of Ling Yuan, the channel formation sky. But why was this layer so different from the other four layers? Fellow Taoist, please follow me. The soul cultivator Xiao Hua appeared next to the Jade Archive Xiao Hua. After raising his hand in salute, he flew towards the dark clouds. Puzzled, Jade Archive Xiao Hua followed soul cultivator Xiao Hua into the sky. Before long, they had reached the edge of the dark cloud, where there was an enormous space. This space was gray and misty, and strands of dark green light wandered beneath soul cultivator Xiao Hua's feet. Large green seal characters were constantly bursting out from within the light. Oh, this is the same as the previous fourth heaven. Jade Archive Xiao Hua seemed to have understood something. He nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist, what you mean is that outside these dark clouds is the condensed meridian sky. Then what are these dark clouds?" Even as he spoke, Whitey's enormous draconic body flew over. Green light flashed around its body, and a Xiao Hua that looked exactly like the soul cultivator Xiao Hua appeared in front of him. Jade Archive Xiao Hua was stunned. It seemed that Whitey had never transformed into his original appearance. How could it do so today? Jade Archive Xiao Hua couldn't help but cry out, "How can you transform into Ai's appearance? Your soul? Not an ordinary body." Heh. Xiao Hua's smile was far more brilliant than the soul cultivator Xiao Hua's. Proud and excited, he shouted, "Xiao Hua." Of course, this poor Taoist knows that. Not only are people's souls different, but it's also impossible for two identical souls to exist in this world. Furthermore, this poor Taoist isn't a human, and his soul is even more different from a human's. There's no way this poor Taoist can take on a human form that looks exactly like you. But I can transform into you now. Also, look at him. Doesn't he look a little different from before? With that, Whitey pointed at soul cultivator Xiao Hua. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua's gaze fell on soul cultivator Xiao Hua's face, Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's rigid face suddenly blinked at Whitey, and then the corner of his mouth slightly rose, unexpectedly smiling. Uh, Jade Archive Xiao Hua was stunned. Smiling bitterly, he cupped his hands towards Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and said, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist. Now you're even more like I. Fellow Taoist, what kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd? Why are you still hiding it from I?" Heh. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua laughed and said to Whitey, "This is all thanks to fellow Taoist. You should ask him. Hurry up and transform back." Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at Whitey, who was winking at him, and helplessly scolded, "You are you, I am me. Is it fun for you to transform into my appearance?" "Ah, yes, it's fun." Little White Xiao Hua laughed heartily. He pulled Jade Archive Xiao Hua's hand and said, "Come with me. I'll show you something interesting." After transforming into Xiao Hua, Whitey's personality seemed to have changed. He was much more quick-witted than before, which made Jade Archive Xiao Hua quite happy. The three identical Xiao Huas flew over the mountain-like dark clouds and arrived at a very ordinary place. Whitey smiled and said, "Xiao Hua, take a look. What's different about this place?" Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked left and right, but couldn't see anything different. Shaking his head, he said, "I can't see anything different." "Haha, I knew it. He definitely can't see it." Whitey laughed and clapped his hands, looking at Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua said unhappily, "If I can't see it, he can't see it either." Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and a strand of soul flew out of his mouth. Whoosh! A dark green light flashed, and a dozen or so strands of soul came out of the dark cloud. "Xiao Hua, come with this poor Taoist, and take a look." Whitey rushed over and landed right in the middle of the soul strands. Its entire body once again transformed into its dragon form. As soon as the soul strands were retracted, Whitey immediately disappeared into the dark clouds. The lightning and the broken strands did not stop it. "Oh!" Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and asked, "Can it be that we can only enter through these soul threads? Are the other places the same?" Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua nodded. "That's right. Whitey has been hovering under the dark clouds for many days, and only then did he discover the secret inside. You'll know everything once you enter." "Okay." Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't ask any more questions. His body floated up and landed in the middle of the soul threads. The soul threads were like antennae, and Jade Archive Xiao Hua immediately entered the dark clouds. The surface of the dark clouds was the same as the layers of the 9 heavens of spirit origin. They were all made of soul threads, but the soul threads here were somewhat black and mixed with lightning. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua passed through the surface of the dark clouds, his vision turned dark. This place was different from the 9 heavens of spirit origin. However, when Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked up again, there was a faint light of the moon and stars in the darkness. Borrowing this light, Jade Archive Xiao Hua saw that this was a curved space. "Xiao Hua, come up." Whitey's voice came from the top of the space. Jade Archive Xiao Hua obeyed and flew up. It was very strange. This space was different from the 9 heavens of spirit origin. One didn't need to rely on the depth of a soul cultivator to fly high. Moreover, as Xiao Hua flew higher, the space around him became bigger and bigger. After flying for a while, Jade Archive Xiao Hua still couldn't see Whitey's figure. However, waves of coldness inexplicably emerged from the surroundings. This coldness was like a cold wind blowing on Jade Archive Xiao Hua's body, making his muscles and bones weak. Moreover, after flying for a while, Jade Archive Xiao Hua felt even more limp and numb, making Jade Archive Xiao Hua feel very uneasy. "How is it?" Whitey's dragon body appeared about 10 zhang above Xiao Hua's head. "Do you feel like you're going to be blown away?" "Indeed." Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't hide it. "If I fly any higher, I won't be able to bear it. Look at that place again." Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua also flew up and pointed his finger at a distant place. In the night sky, which looked like the mouth of a well, there were two faint green lights. One was like a half moon, the other half was blocked by the edge of the night sky, and the other half was a complete star shape. Spirit, looking at the moon's shape in the distance, Jade Archive Xiao Hua felt something and nodded. This is the green seal character, Spirit. That's also the green seal character, Spirit. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua didn't find it strange. He pointed at the green seal character that looked like a star and said, "This should also be one of the 9 heavens of spirit origin, but I don't know why it's so strange." "It's more than strange," Whitey hurriedly said. "It's simply strange." "All right, Xiaohua, do you remember when I told you that your meridian condensing heaven might be sealed?" I naturally remember. Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. At that time, I had a feeling of oppression, an intuition that I couldn't break through the barrier between the two heavens. But I could. I tested it a little with him and found that although there was an extremely oppressive feeling, the barrier between the two heavens could still be broken through. That's why I told you that I was wrong. Indeed, Jade Archive Xiaohua seemed to have understood what Whitey wanted to say and nodded with a smile. But when I followed him to the meridian condensing heaven, there was this dark cloud above our heads. All the oppressive, dense, and sealed feeling from before came from this dark cloud. Whitey explained again, "I stayed here with him for a long time, but I couldn't find the secret inside. Therefore, he went to cultivate and comprehend the bone joints, and I searched here. I don't believe that there's something in this world that I don't know." Whitey's I was extremely similar to Xiaohua's. Jade Archive Xiaohua almost laughed out loud. "But I searched for a long time, but I couldn't find it. But just a few days ago, the entire dark cloud suddenly boiled and swelled, and an extremely bright light of the stars and the moon came from the place where we came in," Little White said proudly. As such, I hurriedly flew over and found that there was a crack there. Just as I arrived, the crack started to shrink, and by the time he arrived, the crack had already disappeared, and not a single hole could be seen. Fortunately, he could use the soul strands to guide the soul strands out, and when I touched those soul strands, my whole body immediately shrank and was pulled in. After I came in and was illuminated by the light of the stars and the moon, I could transform into your appearance. Chapter 3399. I can also smile now. Soul Cultivator Xiaohua also said with a smile. Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned as he listened, then looked up at the two spirit characters in the sky. He seemed to have thought of something and said in a low voice, "Previously, I remembered that there was a saying of 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls in this world, but when it comes to soul cultivators, there are only 3 spiritual souls and 6 physical souls left. The 9 heavens of spirit origin has 9 layers, and this layer is probably the hidden layer, right? There are 2 spirit characters in this layer of heaven, which should be the 2 characters of yin and yang. It should be called the yin-yang spirit sky. This layer of heaven has stars all over the sky, so it's also very good to call it Star Splendor Heaven." Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua suggested again. Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't care about the name of this layer of heaven, but he asked curiously, "However, within the 6 heavens of Spirit Soul, there are 50 green seal characters in each layer. Why is there only 1 in this layer of heaven? Could it be that this is one of the 12 missing green seal characters?" Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua also frowned. "I'm afraid so." Jade Archive Xiao Hua nodded. "This spirit character is not simple. When Little White arrived here, he could use his spirit to transform into a spirit soul, and fellow Taoist also has a spirit. As for I just now, I also felt as if I was enlightened. The reason why my human race is the spirit of all living things is probably because of this double spirit sky, right?" "Extremely so," Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Others who cultivate the 9 heavens of spirit origin can't see the situation of each layer of heaven, so they naturally can't sense this Star Splendor Heaven. As for our opportunity, Little White really found this place based on his feelings. That's right, it's an opportunity. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua sighed. The vibration just now was probably because I advanced to the nascent soul stage and caused a phenomenon in the sky. This double spirit sky had its own changes, so Little White discovered something strange, right? This is Xiao Hua's opportunity, and also the opportunity of all fellow Taoists. At the same time, it's also I's opportunity. Little White said with a smile. When I flew in, there was a lot of heaven and earth spirit energy abnormally abundant. Moreover, the starlight in this heaven and earth spirit energy was very bright, flashing like fluctuations. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua smiled and said, I formed the nascent soul in my lower dantian and attracted the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The double spirit sky should be able to sense it. However, the soul cultivator Xiao Hua said, that day in the void, there were only fluctuations. It was more like the fluctuations attracted the star power, which was why the heaven and earth spirit energy was produced in star splendor heaven, right? Left and right are the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. One of you is called the first stage of the spirit heaven, and the other is called the star splendor heaven. Don't you think it's boring? However, I feel that this place is different from the other heavens. Little White was disdainful of the disagreement between the two and grinned. The bottom of this place is extremely narrow, almost inaudible, and the top is extremely wide, like a tree root deeply rooted in the ground. How can you still call it heaven? Hearing this, Jade Archive Xiao Hua thought about the Bodhi tree next to the exquisite temple. Wasn't it made up of many branches twisted together? And how many roots had penetrated into the foothills? Thinking of this, Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said with a smile, if that's the case, why don't we call it spiritual root? No, it's too vulgar. It doesn't sound as good as Star Splendor Heaven. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua immediately objected. Besides, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here is much more than spiritual light. If you want to call it spiritual root, you have to call it spiritual root. Io, hearing soul cultivator Xiao Hua mention the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly became happy again. He clapped his hands and said, what fellow Taoists said is right. Just as I advanced to the nascent soul stage, there is spiritual energy of heaven and earth here. In other words, I can rely on whether or not this place can sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and then judge whether or not others can sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and then judge whether or not they can cultivate my Tao sex cultivation method. Fellow Taoist, if this place isn't called spiritual root, then what is it called? Forget it. Do as you wish. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua couldn't stand Jade Archive Xiao Hua said, you have the final say. If you call it spiritual root, then it is spiritual root. If you call it spiritual aura heaven, then it is spiritual aura heaven. If you say you can judge whether or not a cultivator can cultivate, then you can judge whether or not others can cultivate. It has nothing to do with I. Don't. Jade Archive Xiao Hua pulled soul cultivator Xiao Hua and said, what does it have nothing to do with you? I am Xiao Hua, and you are also Xiao Hua. With me, Xiao Hua, in this world, who dares to bully and humiliate the Tao sect? You also have a part of the responsibility here. How about this? You carefully think about whether or not you can find a cultivation method to judge whether or not a mortal spiritual root can sense the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. How about it? I hear. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua was about to refuse, but looking at Jade Archive Xiao Hua's smile that wasn't a smile, he said very dejectedly, all right, since I's soul bridge and that green seal text called cleansing heaven and washing earth have already been practiced, I will help you take a look. Many thanks, fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua bowed and said, when I's nascent soul is formed, I will ask fellow Taoists to go out for a walk. This is what fellow Taoists said. I want to be the first to go out and take a look. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua unexpectedly laughed like a little fox. Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly had a feeling that he had fallen into a trap. Humph! Jade Archive Xiao Hua pretended to snort coldly. How effective is that green seal text of cleansing heaven and washing earth? I will let fellow Taoists know. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua said with a smile. This green seal text is like lightning, thunder, clouds, and rain. It is precisely used to break all the talismans of soul cultivators in the world. If you practice it to a profound level, any kind of imprisonment, any kind of seal can be broken. Good. Jade Archive Xiao Hua's face had a slight smile, and he said again, actually, the discovery of spiritual roots doesn't mean anything to you and me, but it has a great impact on the development of the world's Tao. Now that the spiritual aura of heaven and earth has changed greatly in the Dawn Rain continent, all the Tao of disciple selection is ineffective. If we can rely on this spiritual root to select a disciple, you and I will have done a great deed. Yes, I understand. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua seemed to have sensed Jade Archive Xiao Hua's displeasure, and he hurriedly said with a smile, right now, we are only at the spiritual root, so what do the tree trunks, branches, and leaves look like? While Jade Archive Xiao Hua and Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua were talking, Little White was not interested. It just raised its head to look at the starry sky, looking at the two spirit characters, and muttered to itself, I really want to fly up and take a look. Little White, Jade Archive Xiao Hua said with a smile. Since the spirit character is an incomplete green seal text, it must be hidden in a dangerous place. Right now, our cultivation is limited and is not enough to get close to the green seal text. In the future, when our cultivation deepens, we will definitely be able to go and take a look one day. Alas! Unexpectedly, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's comforting words did not make Little White smile, but instead made it sigh. I actually envy you humans. Just the soul alone contains such a great mystery. I really don't know how you humans obtain the favor of heaven and earth, and my soul doesn't seem to have such a mystery. Little White's sigh naturally made Jade Archive Xiao Hua think of the debate he had with Ao Shuai and old monster Ji Feng about who is the wisest of all living things. Whether it is a human, a demon, or even a spiritual flower or spiritual grass, they are all the heavenly bell. They all have their own value of existence, and each has its own strengths and weaknesses. Everyone is a spiritual object of heaven and earth. So why should we care about who is the wisest of all living things? Jade Archive Xiao Hua could only put it this way. Little White was not like old monster Ji Feng, so Xiao Hua could only compromise. Unexpectedly, Little White shook its head slightly and whispered, Xiao Hua, you are still wrong. I am wrong. Jade Archive Xiao Hua stared blankly, somewhat unable to understand Little White's words. Where did I go wrong? Little White shook its head again and said, I only envy the souls of the human race. Envy that the human race has the heavenly bell. But this kind of envy is only envy, and it is limited to the soul. Compared to my demon race, the difference between the human race and my demon race is not just a little bit. To be honest, in my eyes, the human race can only rely on their spirituality to compete with my demon race. Everything else is useless. Sweat. Jade Archive Xiao Hua did not expect Little White to be as arrogant as old monster Ji Feng and Ao Shuai. Its tone just now was just jealousy, not envy. He could not help but smile bitterly. My human race? Are you still a human? Little White did not wait for Jade Archive Xiao Hua to finish speaking and asked with a smile. Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled even more bitterly. Last time, when they surrounded the fire dragon's soul essence, Little White already knew too many of his secrets. If he really forced himself to say it, he really could not be considered a complete human. Actually, the most terrifying thing about the human race is their ability to reproduce. Little White looked at Jade Archive Xiao Hua, knowing that he had nothing to say, and continued, In my memory, when I first arrived at Yellow Flower Ridge, there were not many people nearby, but what happened later? Although the population of Yellow Flower Ridge had withered, how many people from the secular world would appear within a 1,000-li radius? In my demon race. Ouch! I seem to remember something. At this point, Little White's face changed slightly, and suddenly turned into a huge dragon rolling in the spiritual root, no longer paying attention to Jade Archive Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist, there seems to be an old monk peeping at your bath outside. Soul Cultivator Xiaohua reminded with a smile. You'd better go out quickly. Don't let your spring scenery be exposed. Alas, Jade Archive Xiaohua ignored Soul Cultivator Xiaohua's laughter and sighed. You should know the cause of this matter. This old monk wants I to shave my head and become a monk. Although his tantra does not prohibit meat and fish and marriage, I am still a Taoist disciple. How can I become a monk at will? Future Buddha, just listen to it. It's very arrogant. Soul Cultivator Xiaohua instigated. Why don't we play with future Buddha's orthodoxy? Fellow Taoist, you now have so many fellow Taoists. Ouch, that's right. The Jade Archive Xiaohua understood that Soul Cultivator Xiaohua's thoughts were exactly what he was thinking. However, because he was thinking too much, he didn't think of these details. This poor Taoist doesn't need to shave his head, but the Buddha Saraira can shave it. The guy originally practiced Buddhism. He should be willing to shave his head, right? Farewell, fellow Taoist. Jade Archive Xiaohua cupped his hands and retreated from the mysterious dark clouds. In front of him was the steaming hot spring in the snow. Xiaohua was hesitating whether to escape or not, but he found the mystery of the spiritual root in the mysterious dark clouds, which delayed him. Now that the old monk of exquisite temple chased after him, how could he still have the face to escape? However, with the Buddha Saraira as a scapegoat, Xiaohua did not mind becoming a monk once. Chapter 3400. Looking at the old monk who was holding a strange yellow monk robe, Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. Just now, he had been talking nonsense with Little White about the spirits of all living things. In fact, as a human, the most difficult thing for a demon to reach was the human heart. Only with a heart could one be benevolent, righteous, and virtuous. Only then could one have no regrets for one's faith. This kind of human nature was something that demons would never understand. From the exquisite temple to this pool, Xiaohua only needed to fly. However, Xiaohua also knew that along the way, not to mention the slippery snow and rugged mountain roads, even with the old monk's turbid eyes, it was already extremely difficult for him to reach this pool from the exquisite temple. Not to mention, the old monk's clothes were already covered in snow. Xiaohua didn't know how long he had been standing here. However, the old monk's arms were very calm as he held the robe. The yellow hat was placed on top of the robe, and a string of prayer beads was placed beside the hat. His eyes were calmly looking forward. They had already passed through the water vapor and landed outside the cliff. From those turbid eyes, Xiaohua could see the old monk's conviction and persistence. Although Xiaohua didn't say anything, he believed that Xiaohua was bathing in the pool. Facing such a heavy trust, Xiaohua felt a rare kind of nervousness. It was as if this was a kind of responsibility. This responsibility made Xiaohua feel even more restrained and uneasy than when he faced the strange insect in the void. Elder, please wait a moment. I will come up right away. Xiaohua muttered to himself for a moment. He used his hand to lift up the hot water in the pool and symbolically wash his body a few times. Buddhist Lord, don't be anxious. A smile flashed across the old monk's extremely old face. He said, carefully bathing and washing away the dust in the body is also cleansing the mind. Using a pure mind is the foundation of Buddhism. Buddhist Lord spent so much effort and didn't slack off in the slightest. This is truly worthy of this poor monk's admiration. Sweat. A trace of shame appeared in Xiaohua's heart. He originally wanted to get up, but now he could only be patient and properly wash his body. Although he didn't wash away any dirt, Xiaohua felt that it was a blasphemy to the old monk's lofty faith. Looking at the monk robe in the old monk's hand, Xiaohua waved his hand, and the yellow monk robe flew into the air. After casually putting it on, it landed beside the old monk. This poor monk will help Buddha Lord change his clothes. The old monk felt the clothes in his hands fly away. After a while, he finally opened his mouth. Xiao wanted to put on his own clothes, but this monk robe was different from a Taoist robe. It was even different from the monk robes Xiao Hua had seen before. It was very strange, so he didn't put on any pretense. He smiled and said, "Thank you, elder." When the old monk heard this, he beamed with joy. He looked at Xiao Hua with his eyes closed, and his hands trembled as he helped Xiao Hua put on his clothes. After half a meal's worth of time, Xiao Hua finally put on the monk's robe. When one of his arms came out of the monk's robe, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh of relief. He looked at the old monk who had also changed into a new monk's robe and asked, "Elder, you don't have to wear this monk's robe every day, right?" "Buddha Lord, don't worry. This is the Buddha Lord's formal robe. It can only be worn during my tantric sect's major celebrations. There's no need to wear it on ordinary days." The old monk smiled and said, "Moreover, my Shaolin Long Temple's lineage has always been small. When this poor monk passes away, there will only be one Buddha Lord. The Buddha Lord status is honorable. Other than the current Buddha Lord, who else can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Buddha Lord in the past? If the Buddha Lord wants to wear it, he can wear it. No one can stop him. Hee, that's really free and unfettered." Xiao Hua smiled. The old monk proudly said, "Of course, my tantric sect has always been an anomaly in the Buddhist sect. In the eyes of others, it is full of mystery." "I understand." Xiao Hua smiled. It was funny but also a bit bitter. Just now, when the old monk was changing his clothes, he used his spiritual sense and true qi to check the old monk's meridians and body. He even used the Devil Realms technique to check his blood vessels. Just as the old monk said, the old monk was really at the end of his life. His meridians had long withered. The essence of his body was also dried up. His heart and blood vessels were abnormally old. Everything he did now was based on a kind of belief. The scene of the old monk lying on the ground was definitely not a coincidence. Facing such a body, even Xiao Hua's rejuvenation pill was powerless to bring him back to life. Alas, there is a limit to one's strength. It is indeed so. Perhaps only an immortal or a true Buddha Lord can let this old man live until tomorrow. Xiao Hua sighed. "Buddha Lord, please." This poor monk can finally shave the Buddha Lord's head. The old monk put his palms together and bowed in a very gratified manner. This is the most glorious moment of this poor monk's life. It is also the moment this poor monk has looked forward to for a lifetime. "Thank you for your trouble, elder." Xiao Hua used his monk robe to wrap the old monk. The two of them slowly flew up and flew towards Shaolin Long Temple. Although Xiao Hua was afraid that the old monk would not be able to take it and flew extremely slowly, he still landed in front of Shaolin Long Temple's main hall in a moment. Although the old monk could not see clearly, when his feet touched the ground, he felt the familiarity of the surroundings. He was not surprised and said with a smile, "Although Buddha Lord has not shaved his head, he actually has such divine ability. It is truly the fortune of my Tantric Buddhism sect. I do not dare. They are all insignificant Taoists. Compared to Elder's Cultivation, they are far inferior." Xiao Hua did not dare to be too arrogant in front of an old man like Dao Shan. He replied humbly, "This poor monk's cultivation has just begun. It cannot be compared to Buddha Lord who has already cultivated for several lifetimes. Even if Buddha Lord is a senior cultivator in this life and does not understand Buddhism, as long as he enters my Buddhism sect, he will be able to find the good karma and good karma of that day. All Buddhism sect's cultivation can be traced." The old monk's seemingly careless words immediately made Xiao Hua feel greatly alarmed in his heart. That's right. Buddhism sect emphasizes reincarnation and cultivation. This hidden immortal continent, this Xiao feels so familiar. Although I have not found Luzhen yet, I have not found Piao Miao sect, but perhaps it is this Zhao's experience from my previous life. Xiao Hua's thoughts turned rapidly. Could it be that this Xiao is really Alas, there's always only one truth in this world. Although Xiao Hua is already a nascent soul master, he is still so insignificant under the heavenly Tao. He wants to find his own origin from the confusing world of the human world. All kinds of traces, 1,000 layers of fog, always make him unable to find the way back on the wrong path. I know. The old monk raised his hand and pushed open the door of the main hall. He did not ask about Xiao Hua's cultivation. He did not even care if Xiao Hua was a Confucian cultivator or a Taoist cultivator. Perhaps he already regarded Xiao Hua as a lay disciple of Buddhism sect. Buddha Lord, please, the old monk pushed open the door. He did not dare to take half a step forward and said very respectfully. Xiao Hua was also not polite and stepped into the main hall. However, he was also somewhat nervous in his heart. He did not know what was inside this main hall. Xiao Hua naturally did not enter the main hall of Buddhism sect. However, he saw many Buddhist shrines and Buddhist statues in the ruins of Buddhism sect. Even in his memory, there was once a golden statue of Buddha. However, this Shaolin Long Temple was a branch of Tantra Buddhism. Moreover, it was built 10,000 years ago to wait for him, the so-called future Buddha Lord. How could Xiao Hua not be curious? The whole main hall was empty, but it was also abnormally clean. Xiao Hua raised his eyes and saw a 10-feet golden body. This golden body was abnormally fat, with a bare chest and a very warm smile on its face. What was special was that on both sides of its belly, which was bigger than 10 months of pregnancy, in its left hand was a small bag, and in its right hand was a thick prayer bead. Moreover, this golden body was casually lying there. It was not standing like an ordinary golden body of Buddha Lord. It was also not like when Xiao Hua first formed Buddha's Saraira with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the earth. This is the future Buddha Lord. Xiao Hua saw that the golden body of Buddha inside was not too different from what he had imagined. It was the same as what he had seen in the ruins of Buddhism sect. Unconsciously, his heart was slightly calmed, a kind of inexplicable calmness. In front of the golden body of Buddha, there was only an ordinary incense table. On it, 2 thick red candles were lit. In the middle of the red candles, there was a small fist-sized incense burner. On the incense burner, there were 9 red incense sticks, each as thick as a thumb. The incense burner was not big, so the 9 incense sticks had already completely filled the incense burner. At this time, it should be because the old monk had waited for Xiao Hua for too long. The incense sticks had almost burned to the end. In front of the incense table, there were 2 ordinary praying mats. Although they were somewhat old, one of them was particularly worn out. Before the praying mat, there was no Buddhist weapon, such as a wooden fish. There was only a small box, half of which was covered by a bright yellow silk. When Xiao Hua stopped to look, the old monk had already shakily walked to the praying mat. He knelt on the praying mat, kowtowed, and recited, Namo Mithriya Buddha, disciple kowtows to Buddha. Disciple has waited under the green lamp for nearly 100 years. Now, I finally welcome Buddha Lord's flesh in this life. Disciple is fortunate to be able to shave Buddha Lord's flesh today. May Buddha Lord send down the auspiciousness of 100,000 worlds to bless Buddha Lord's flesh. Disciple is willing to use my broken body to help Buddha Lord cross the tribulation in this life. Immediately, the old monk respectfully kowtowed 9 times with his head on the ground. His mouth was also chanting, and at this time, Xiao Hua was once again bewildered. After a full half cup of tea's time, the 9 incense sticks finally burned to the end. The old monk raised his head, put his palms together, and said, Namo Mithriya Buddha. Then, he lifted his hand and lifted the silk covering the small box. When he opened the box, there was a bronze mirror and a simple razor inside. The old monk invited the razor out with both hands. He turned around and coughed. Bodhi, I am holding the blade for Buddha Lord today. Are you willing to abandon everything in the secular world and enter my Buddhist sect? Elder, Xiao Hua walked to the front. He didn't want to hide anything and said, Although I cultivate Buddhist sect's exquisite leaf sutra, I was already a Tao sect disciple before practicing Buddhist sect's cultivation method. Moreover, my cultivation method is very complicated. If I say it, Elder may not believe me. Today, I came from Hidden Immortal Continent, but I want to find a senior monk who knows the method of nirvana. I really came to Shao Ling Long Temple to ask for directions. I didn't expect there to be so many surprises waiting for me here. Elder, let me shave my head and respect me as the future Buddha Lord. I can accept it. But this shave matter, just now when I was bathing, I already thought it through. I have already cultivated Buddha's Saraira. Elder, can you let this Buddha's Saraira replace me to shave my head and become a monk? Chapter 34:01. Exquisite Leaf Scripture. When the old monk heard this, he couldn't help but be startled. The razor in his hand trembled even more. A series of words came out of his mouth that Xiao Hua didn't understand, the same tone as when he was praying. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Elder, I came from the Hidden Immortal Continent, so I don't understand the language of the Pure Land world. Elder, if you have anything to say, please speak slowly. Namo Methriya Buddha. The old monk let out a long breath and respectfully asked. This poor monk is really overjoyed. I lost my calm for a moment and let Buddha Lord laugh at me. Although my exquisite leaf temple is waiting for the arrival of the Buddha Lord. And at the same time, we also prepared all the Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist secret technique for the Buddha Lord, and even offered sarairas as offerings. But the exquisite leaf scripture that the Buddha Lord cultivates is not included. The name of this Buddhist scripture is not even recorded in the Buddhist scriptures of the Pure Land world. It is only passed down by word of mouth in my exquisite leaf temple. The Buddha Lord has 9 lifetimes of fate to be able to practice this Buddhist scripture. So naturally, he is indeed the Buddha Lord that my exquisite leaf temple is waiting for. The old monk paused for a moment and took a deep breath as if he was calming himself down. Then he said, Buddha Lord, you have such an opportunity to cultivate Buddha's Saraira before shaving your head. But how can a Saraira shave your head? What? Buddha Sarairas? Until now, the old monk was shocked as if he had just woken up from a dream. His shriveled lips trembled violently, and he could no longer hold the razor in his hand. He loosened his grip, and the razor fell to the ground. Xiao Hua raised his hand, and the razor floated up, flying back to the old monk's hand. Then, a string of words that Xiao Hua couldn't understand came out of the old monk's mouth. While speaking, the old monk knelt on the praying mat and kowtowed several times. Looking at the old monk's ecstatic appearance, Xiao Hua's heart was both proud and happy. He was willing to bring hope to the old man, no matter how big or small. Seeing that the incense on the incense table was about to go out, Xiao Hua hurriedly reminded, Elder, the 9 incense sticks in front of the Buddha are about to go out. It's fine. The old monk said in a relaxed manner. I was worried before the hot spring. I was even prepared to shave Lord Buddha's head before the candles went out. But now I have to shave Buddha's Saraira. Such earthly incense is no longer worthy. Let it burn out slowly. This is all Buddha's arrangement. As if he was afraid that Xiao Hua didn't understand, the old monk explained, the razors of the secular world, the incense sticks of the secular world, they're all used to shave the body of a mortal. To shave the body of a true Buddha's Saraira, that is something that only the eminent monks who have saved the Buddha's fruit, and even our Buddha, has the qualifications to do. The incense sticks are definitely the colored glaze fragrant oil of our Buddha's thunderclap temple, and the razors are also the severing mundane silk of our Buddha's thunderclap temple. Alas, this is all recorded in the Buddhist sect's ancient books. How many people are able to cultivate Buddha's Saraira? Since he had cultivated the Buddha's Saraira, how could he not have shaved his head? Compared to shaving one's body, shaving one's head for a Buddha's Saraira surpasses how much. Lord Buddha has already abandoned his body before entering our Buddhist sect. This is truly worthy of celebration. Hearing this, Xiao Hua really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was just being lazy and avoiding it. But it actually coincided with some of the Buddhist sect secrets. He rubbed his nose. He really wanted to tell the old monk that whether it was shaving one's head with a Buddha Saraira or shaving one's body, they were both just shaving. Buddhism equalized all living things, so Buddha's Saraira and the body should also be equal. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua couldn't say this to the old monk, who was a bit flustered. He could only wait until the old monk calmed down a bit. Or perhaps he wouldn't have the chance to say this to the old monk in this lifetime. This time it took longer than last time. Only then did the old monk's words become orderly. Lord Buddha, if that's the case, Lord Buddha's shave should actually be done in the Thunderclap Temple and personally presided over by the current Lord Buddha. Disciples' cultivation is shallow. If I were to shave Lord Buddha's head, I'm afraid I would provoke Lord Buddha's displeasure and affect Lord Buddha's cultivation. No matter, Xiao Hua said with a smile. I know the Thunderclap Temple, but the Thunderclap Temple doesn't know me. I want to go find Lord Buddha, but Lord Buddha doesn't want to find me. If I can't shave my head because of this and affect my cultivation, Elder, wouldn't Lord Buddha punish you even more? Hee hee. Lord Buddha's words are reasonable. The old monk faintly smiled. My tantric sect and the future Lord Buddha and the Thunderclap Temple are all Buddhist sect branches, but after all, forget it, Disciple won't say anymore. Disciple is now bold enough to shave Lord Buddha's head. Disciple naturally received good karma because of this. It's extremely beneficial to Disciple's cultivation in the next life. Disciple thanks Lord Buddha for the gift. After saying that, the old monk respectfully bowed to Xiao Hua again. Xiao Hua smiled and raised his hand to help the old monk up, saying, Elder has been cultivating bitterly here for 100 years. Now is the time for this seat to repay you. This is what Elder should have received. If possible, this seat is willing to bring this honor to all the branches of Xilinglong Temple. Disciple represents my Xilinglong Temple to thank Lord Buddha for the gift. The old monk was overjoyed, trembling with joy. Originally, Disciple wanted to tell Lord Buddha clearly after Lord Buddha's head shave. Now that Lord Buddha has already refined Buddha Saraira, Lord Buddha only needs to use the Saraira in the Buddha's head hall of my Xilinglong Temple. That will be the glory of my Xilinglong Temple. What? Xiao Hua was shocked, almost inconceivably saying, Refining your Saraira is a gift to you? Is this the glory you've been waiting for? That's right. It's exactly so. Lord Buddha only needs to integrate these Saraira into Lord Buddha Saraira. That will be the greatest gift to us. The old monk was very sure. After Disciple shave Lord Buddha's head, Disciple will go to the west. Lord Buddha, please cremate Disciple's remains and use the Saraira inside. Disciple can wait for Lord Buddha in this life. Help Lord Buddha shave Lord Buddha's head and then integrate the Saraira with Lord Buddha's Saraira. Lord Buddha's light will be able to refine Disciple's karma. Disciple will definitely be able to achieve Buddha's fruit with a karmic and unobstructed heart after reincarnation. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua, someone understood, but he still hesitated. This seat has never read Buddhist scriptures. Previously, I have also seen the cultivation method of the great strength Vajradharma body. It is a selfish act of swallowing other people's Saraira to strengthen oneself. Could it be that this seat's Buddha Saraira is different from this cruel cultivation method? Naturally, there is an essential difference. The old monk smiled and explained, Lord Buddha only needs to look at the Buddhist scriptures at the side of the main hall to know the specifics. The great strength Vajradharma body is to cultivate the position of our Buddhist protector. It only borrows the power of the Saraira and does not eliminate the karma of the Saraira. Disciple doesn't know how much Lord Buddha knows about our Buddhist sect's Buddha fruits. Jalan, Venerable, Heavenly King, Vajra, Arhat, Bodhisattva, and Buddha, these 7 kinds of Buddha fruits, except for Bodhisattva and Buddha, which can eliminate the Saraira karma, and use the supreme power of Buddha's light to help people cultivate in the next life. The other 5 kinds of Buddha fruits can only borrow power like the great strength Vajradharma fruit. Not necessarily. Xiao Hua's suspicion immediately arose again. He couldn't help but secretly criticize Sarira can help the cultivation of the golden body. This is known by all Buddhist experts. How many senior monks can cultivate bodhisattva in Buddha? How many people can know the effect of this Sarira, eliminating the Sarira karma and helping people cultivate in the next life? It may not be their words to scare people. However, seeing that this old monk was so pious, Xiaohua didn't dare to say these words, especially to provoke him. Of course, Xiaohua was only suspicious. He didn't study Buddhism and didn't have the secret technique to eliminate the Sarira karma. The Buddhist sect is a cultivation path that is on par with the Taoist sect. Who can say that they don't have this kind of magical power to help people cultivate in the next life? While speaking, the old monk's figure swayed twice, as if he couldn't stand steadily. Elder, Xiaohua hurriedly supported the old monk and called out, "Disciple doesn't have much time left in the mortal world. Lord Buddha, please take pity on disciple, and let disciple have the honor of shaving Lord Buddha's Sarira into my tantra." The old monk hurriedly waved his hand, somewhat out of breath. Good. Seeing this, Xiaohua knew that this was already the old monk's last wish. He also didn't dare to be negligent. He patted his forehead, and the Sarira came out of his Niwen palace. When the 4-chi long golden body held the clear water bottle and dressed in the 10,000 Buddha painting stepped into the air, Amitabha Buddha, good, he chanted the name of Buddha, his face solemn and benevolent. Rumble. The heaven and earth shook, and the wind and clouds changed color. Where the wind and clouds swayed, a fierce wind rose. Wherever the fierce wind passed, the snow that filled the sky was blown into the sky, and the layers of dark clouds in the sky were cut down layer by layer in this fierce wind. The wind grew stronger and stronger, and it was as if there were small holes in the air for thousands of miles around. The seemingly endless power of faith poured out from these small holes, like a waterfall falling from the sky. Tens of thousands of streams surged and fell toward the inconspicuous little Linglong temple of the Great Snow Mountain. This is... The old monk was shocked again, because as the power of faith fell from the sky, heavenly flowers covered the entire snowy mountain. Fairies wearing flawless heavenly clothes sat cross-legged on the exquisite temple, either playing the pipa or softly singing. The sound of nature filled the entire main hall. One after another, powerful sky dragons roared and swam around the mini exquisite temple. The effect of Nanwu Guanxian Bodhisattva in the longevity town was too shocking. Under the influence of the Buddhist sect's disciples, the worship of Guanxian spread uncontrollably throughout the entire hidden immortal continent. This pure power of faith should have slowly poured into Xiaohua's Buddha relic. But because of the innate divine restriction, this power of faith was not collected by Xiaohua in time and had already condensed to a very terrifying degree. Now that the Buddha relic suddenly appeared in the Pure Land world, the power of faith naturally gathered together, and its momentum was naturally extraordinary, causing even more strange phenomena. Previously, when Xiaohua took out the Buddha relic in the Black Cloud Ridge, the situation appeared like this. But fortunately, this was the Pure Land world, the Buddhist sect's mainland. Wherever the Buddha's light shone, there were many people who achieved the Buddha fruit, and this power of faith was indeed very eye-catching. The monks either knelt down to express their thanks or rang the bell to celebrate, and no one came to disturb them. Chapter 34:02. Wu. Similar to the spirit tide, the power of faith gathered to a certain extent and immediately turned into threads of crystal-like objects. These threads of crystal-like light flashed and fell into Xiaohua's Buddha Sarira. Every time a thread of crystal-like light flashed, the Buddha Sarira would slightly tremble. Moreover, as the crystal-like threads fell, the Buddha Sarira's body flickered with golden light and actually broke through the 4 feet restriction. It gradually increased in height until it reached 5 feet before stopping. The strange thing was that as the Buddha Sarira increased in height, the figures of the dancing fairies and roaring dragons from before actually gradually became blurry. When the Buddha's golden body reached 5 feet, it actually disappeared. Only the heavenly flowers were still fluttering around the snowy mountain. At this time, the strange phenomenon within the 10 million li radius had already converged to a 100 li radius. The dark clouds and snowflakes in the sky had all disappeared, revealing a bright sun. Perhaps because the snowy mountain was high enough, or perhaps because the sky here was pure enough, the sun was very dazzling. Under the sun, the pure crystal-like threads of crystal-like silver light swayed and fell like swimming fish. Wherever the crystal-like threads passed, gusts of wind were also produced. The sound of the wind never stopped, as if the world was singing. This disciple is very lucky. The old monk's eyes seemed to also brighten. He trembled as he walked in front of the Buddha, Sarira, and bowed to the sky. This disciple really didn't expect Buddha Lord's Buddha, Sarira, to already have a 5 feet golden body. Buddha Lord's enlightenment in this life will definitely come true. To be able to shave Buddha Lord's head and lead Buddha Lord into our Buddhist sect. This disciple is truly fortunate. Amitabha, the Buddha, Sarira chanted. Although its appearance was exactly the same as Xiaohua's, the benevolence and compassion on its face was not something Xiaohua could have. The golden body of the Buddha, Sarira, descended and stood right in front of the old monk. The old monk extended his trembling right hand and landed on the top of the Buddha, Sarira's head. He chanted, "People say that there are 3,000 worries. All of them are born from the heart and from the head. Cut off worries and let go of worries. Entering our Buddhist sect is joy. The body is an external object. Only the body can enter the mortal world. The mortal world is like the sea. The body is the boat. The Buddha's heart is the helm. Kindness is ashore. Cut off your worries and enter the sea of bitterness." Amitabha. As the old monk chanted, his hand landed on the top of the Buddha, Sarira's head. Boom! With a loud sound, the Buddha, Sarira's golden light brightened the old monk's turbid eyes. He seemed to see the golden body of the Buddha, Sarira. At the moment when the old monk's hand was about to leave the Sarira's head, his middle finger slightly trembled as if it twitched, wanting to touch the top of the golden body again. Amitabha, Amitabha! Suddenly, the sound of Buddha chants resounded throughout the entire main hall of the little exquisite temple. The old monk's hand gently moved away from the top of the Buddha, Sarira's head. He turned his head with difficulty and saw that behind the incense table, the golden body of the Maitreya Buddha was also shining brightly. The sound of chanting was coming from within the golden body. This golden light was like a sword, and the chanting was like a bell. When it landed on the main hall, waves of blood-curdling screams rose one after another. At the same time, strands of black shadows also emerged from the left side. Within the shadows, the intertwining of the fairies and rakshasas were all destroyed by the golden light and the chanting. The old monk covered his chest with one hand. A black shadow also flew out from his body, turning into a black fog and disappearing in midair. The old monk's body fell to the ground of the main hall again, motionless. Amitabha. Xiaohua was shocked at first, but then he had some understanding. He had experienced Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's enlightenment in the longevity town. He knew that the old monk was naturally still the old monk, but when he revealed the golden body of the Buddha Sarira, he had already attracted the heavenly demon. The old monk originally did not have any cultivation, so he was afraid that the heavenly demon had taken advantage of him in an instant. Just now, the heavenly demon probably wanted to have evil thoughts about him, but just happened to encounter the golden body of the Maitreya Buddha that was enshrined in the little exquisite temple, so it was defeated. Xiaohua had some understanding, but Xiaohua did not know. The Buddhism sect was not like the Taoist sect, and the old monk was not like Daoshan. The Buddhism sect did not need to refine any Buddhism sect's cultivation method. As long as one chanted the Buddhist scriptures every day, even if one did not have the strength to truss a chicken in front of the heavenly demon, they would be comparable to a warrior wearing full armor. It was impossible for them to be used by ordinary heavenly demons. Although the old monk had 1 foot in the grave, his life of faith was steadfast, waiting for the Buddha Lord to come. To the heavenly demon, he was simply invulnerable. However, why was the heavenly demon able to take advantage of the old monk's weakness at the last moment of his life? This was not something that Xiao Hua could understand at this time. And what made Xiao Hua even more surprised was that when the old monk fell to the ground, a black shadow with a wisp of arrogant laughter flew out from the old monk's body. Finally, a voice with a hint of unwillingness and anger flew out from the old monk's body. Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body. There is actually the cause of Namo Maitreya Buddha. This is really beyond my expectations. Damn it, this is all the old bald donkey scheme. Today, I fell into your trap, so consider yourself Buddha is 1 foot higher. Maitreya Buddha, I will return. At that time, I will let you know what it means to be 10 feet higher than the devil. This, Xiao Hua's corporeal body naturally didn't see this scene. His golden body, which was already 5 feet tall, but was almost completely empty inside, had long seen this scene clearly. The primordial spirit inside the Buddha's relic instantly understood and almost sucked in a breath of cold air. Buddha and devil are indeed everywhere. If there's good, there's evil. If there's light, there's darkness. This heavenly devil is so formless that it actually sneaked into my corporeal body before I achieved enlightenment. It even subtly eroded my physical body under its influence. I understand now. That day in front of Zhaixing Liu, if the original body's temperament was like before, it may not have had a further conflict with Duanmu Qiu. In Seven Yang Temple, it may not have been so ruthless to the mortal world's constables. Even in Black Wind Ridge, it may not have killed the Bat King and the Bronze Pillar Country's pursuers. All these subtle changes are all because of this heavenly demon. While the Buddha relic primordial spirit was pondering, the golden body of the Buddha above the exquisite temple shone even brighter, and the chanting became even louder. It was as if a golden sun was reflecting the white sun above their heads. The golden light rushed into the sun, and the remaining crystal threads and thousands of wild gales were attracted by the golden light. They rapidly descended, and together with the golden light, they all fell into the Buddha relic. Jia! The Buddha's Sarira shouted a mantra. A golden Jia word flew out from the Buddha's mouth and rushed into the air. It turned into a tiny golden thread and disappeared. Xiao Hua's Buddha's Sarira slightly opened its eyes. It could already see clearly that the golden thread went to the place where the power of faith came from. This Jia word was just like what the old monk said before. It was the Buddha's Sarira borrowing its own power of Buddhism, using the future Buddha Lord's merit to repay the faith of the masses and redeem the Buddha in the sea of suffering. Good, Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. The mysteries of Buddhism are indeed extraordinary. I was a bit stingy before. Just as the golden body of the Buddha's light dissipated, an item that looked like a fallen leaf flew out from the Buddha's Sarira and floated in front of Xiao Hua's Buddha's Sarira. Good, the Buddha's Sarira raised its hand, and that item landed in its hand. It was a golden leaf. Needless to say, it should be one of the last 3 leaves of the exquisite Palette Sutra. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was really overjoyed. Ever since he obtained the exquisite Palette Sutra in the Imperial Thunder Sect, he had always wanted to make up for the leaves on the exquisite pagoda. Unfortunately, even in the ruins of Buddhism, the Buddha's light of the Maitreya Buddha's golden body could not make up for all the leaves. Since then, Xiao Hua had a premonition in his heart that in the Xiaoyu continent where Buddhism was destroyed, he was afraid that it would be impossible for him to make up for the exquisite Palette Sutra. Later on, Xiao Hua accidentally arrived at the hidden immortal continent. Xiao Hua's long-cherished wish once again had a chance to be realized. Of course, the hidden immortal continent was still extremely far away from the Western Paradise. Xiao Hua also did not have extravagant hopes that he would be able to obtain these last 3 leaves in a short period of time. Moreover, Xiao Hua's cultivation in Buddhism had been steadily increasing. Even in the Buddha's Saraira, there were still mysteries that he himself did not know and could not comprehend. Therefore, he was not particularly anxious. He just wanted to go to the Western Paradise when the miscellaneous matters in the hidden immortal continent were settled. First, he would deal with the matter of Jiang Luer's death, and then slowly look for clues about the leaves. Now, through the vein of space, Xiao Hua not only came to the Western Paradise, but also encountered the exquisite temple. This exquisite temple was waiting for his arrival. The leaves hidden in the golden body of the future Buddha of the exquisite temple were prepared for him. Wasn't this the legendary, wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort? At this time, Xiao Hua no longer doubted his identity as the future Buddha. The Buddha's Saraira took the golden leaves and looked up at the clear sky outside the main hall. The sky was exceptionally blue. Looking from a main hall of the exquisite temple, it was particularly close. The Buddha's Saraira unconsciously sighed. Ba, every drink and every peck is predestined in the previous life. One cause and one effect, waiting for 10,000 years. With the help of the Buddhas, I will bear this kind of karma. I will use my karmic fire to refine the karma of the Buddhas and help the Buddhas achieve fruition. Before he could finish speaking, a myriad of Sanskrit chants resounded once again. The sound of copper bells also resounded, and they were struck a total of 81 times before they stopped. Come out! The Buddha Saraira waved its hand, and the Linglong Pagoda flew out from Xiao Hua's Niwen Palace. The golden light flashed and landed on the main hall. That piece of leaf turned into a golden lotus and fell into the pagoda. Kacha! There was a light and crisp sound. It was the Linglong Pagoda fusing into one. Come in, the Buddha Saraira pointed his finger again, and the exquisite pagoda's Buddha's light shone on one side of the main hall. The thick wall immediately turned into nothingness, and all the Buddhist scriptures and golden leaves fell into the exquisite pagoda along with the Buddha's light. After collecting everything in the exquisite temple's sutra pavilion, the Buddha Saraira looked to the other side, and that was the pagoda where the Saraira was placed. Now, the Buddha Saraira had already built a 5-foot golden body, but the golden body was not full, and the lotus platform under his feet was still the 4th rank. The Saraira in the pagoda was indeed useful. However, after looking at the Buddha Saraira for a moment, and then lowering his head to look at the old monk who was already completely lifeless, he was rather hesitant. To be honest, Xiao Hua did not have any special burden on the Saraira that did not have an owner. If he refined it, then he refined it. But these Sarairas were the Saraira of the Buddhas who had been bitterly cultivating in the exquisite temple for 10,000 years, waiting for him. If he refined it, he could erase the karma of these Buddhas and help them achieve fruition. Naturally, Xiao Hua could refine it without any misgivings. But in the end, Xiao Hua did not receive the guidance of the Buddhist sect's senior monks. Now that the Buddha Saraira had just shaved its head and became a monk, he really was not sure. Chapter 34:03. Forget it, this Xiao will take it first. Looking at the old monk lying on the ground with a serene face, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel heartache. This kind of thing had happened several times already, making him feel very uncomfortable. He always felt that in this world, good people rarely have good karma, and evil people live a long life. Army. In a trance, the Buddha's relic chanted the incantation, and the bowl-sized golden character fell on the old monk's body. The golden light dispersed, but the old monk's soul didn't come out. The Buddhist 9 syllables incantation didn't have any effect on the old monk, which made Xiao Hua quite surprised. Lin. Immediately after, the Buddha's relic chanted the incantation again, and as Xiao Hua expected, the old monk's soul still didn't come out. Alas, the old monk bitterly cultivated for a lifetime, but in the end, he was still delayed by this king. Xiao Hua sighed, feeling that because he became a devil, he was implicated, causing the old monk's soul to be unable to escape from the hands of the heavenly devil. It seems that if this old monk wants to reincarnate, this king will really have to use the secret technique of the tantric sect to refine the old monk's relic. But how can I take out the old monk's relic? Moreover, if I want to walk in the Pure Land, it will be troublesome if I don't understand the language here. Let's see what is recorded in the exquisite temple's Buddhist scriptures first. The Buddha's relic waved its hand, and a Buddhist light shot out, and the pagoda in the main hall was also absorbed into the exquisite pagoda. After the exquisite pagoda and the Buddha's relic were absorbed into the exquisite pagoda, Xiaohua looked at the old monk lying on the ground and was very puzzled. The old monk might not be able to live until tomorrow, but after all, there was a big difference between him and his death today. The old monk should have a lot of instructions for Xiaohua. These instructions could only be taught after Xiaohua shaved his head. Now that the old monk was gone, Xiaohua was once again in the dark. However, Xiaohua was already used to this kind of exploration. He very familiarly had the Buddha's relic take out the Buddhist scriptures that had just been absorbed into the exquisite pagoda, and he himself put the old monk's corpse into the small universe bag and slowly walked out of the main hall. The seal of overturning the sea above the Shaolin Long Temple had already been withdrawn when Xiaohua entered the main hall. Now, the bright and dazzling sunlight shone directly into the small courtyard. The sunlight was extremely bright. Although Xiaohua was not afraid, he still naturally stretched out his hand and cupped it against his eyes. Just now, he had come in a hurry and left in a hurry as well. He hadn't looked carefully. Now that Xiaohua's gaze swept over the entire courtyard, he sighed even more. This Shaolin Long Temple was even more austere than the Seven Yang Monastery or even the Jiangchao Monastery. It seemed that other than the remnants of a fire in the small hut, there were no other traces of people living here. Xiaohua really didn't know how the old monk managed to survive here. After all, Xiaohua didn't see any traces of Buddhist cultivation techniques on him. The sun was very bright. Standing under the sun, Xiaohua didn't feel particularly hot. However, a very strange feeling came from Xiaohua's skin. It was as if he was being roasted, and also as if the wind was blowing. However, there wasn't any wind at this time. The wind and snow from before had disappeared in an instant. 10,000 years ago, there was a senior from the Buddhist sect who set up this place, and even set up the Shaolin Long Temple here. Could it be that they were waiting for me? Xiaohua naturally wouldn't be as pious as the old monk. His thoughts were very simple. Looking at this simple and crude temple, he frowned and pondered. If that's the case, then this Zhao's life experience is naturally within this senior's calculations. This Zhao has been too busy these past 10 days. I actually forgot. While thinking, Xiaohua's mind immediately entered the space. He took out the map of the hidden immortal continent that he had obtained from the star-seizing tower. Without saying anything, he threw it to the green-robed Xiaohua. The green-robed Xiaohua continued to nag, but after being smashed by Xiaohua, he immediately shut his mouth. He obediently took out the jade eyes and hastily checked it. Hey, it seems that the temptation is still very useful. Xiaohua's mind withdrew from the space. He looked at the nascent soul sitting cross-legged in his lower dantian. He was very proud. This nascent soul was very popular at this time. Any primordial spirit that wanted to come out and take a look would use this nascent soul. Unfortunately, the nascent soul realm had not yet stabilized, and the nascent soul's body had not yet completely solidified. Otherwise, several primordial spirits would have already started fighting. Of course, if the entire nascent soul was completely solidified, it would only become a late nascent soul realm cultivator. However, for Xiaohua's nascent soul with the Tao of the Heavens as its foundation and the green-robed Xiaohua's secret technique, several primordial spirits, taking turns to control the early nascent soul to come out for a stroll, could not be considered a difficult matter, right? Xiaohua's mind withdrew. Immediately, news came from the Buddha's Saraira. Xiaohua slightly closed his eyes. Subsequently, he nodded and released his Buddhist sense. He found what he was looking for about 999 zhang to the west of the Shaolin Long Temple. Xiao Hua was about to use the cloud riding technique. However, just as he was about to move, he stopped. He turned his head and looked at the small house where the old monk was eating butter tea. He quickly walked over and took out a large wooden board. He placed it in front of the main hall. Then he took out the old monk's corpse from his small chinquin bag and solemnly placed it on top of the wooden board. Along with Xiao Hua's recitation of the rebirth mantra, a strand of Buddhist light once again emerged from the golden Buddha statue and landed on the oil lamp. The worn-out oil lamp flashed with a trace of light, and a bean-sized flame appeared out of thin air from the oil lamp. Amitabha Buddha. Excellent, excellent. Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense was constantly released. However, he still couldn't find out how this flame was born. Xiao Hua couldn't help but sigh. The Buddhist sect's methods were indeed subtle. Xiao Hua held the oil lamp in one hand. The flame of the oil lamp didn't seem inferior in the daytime. Xiao Hua's other hand was holding the wooden board. The old monk's corpse was peacefully lying on top of it. When the sun shone on his body, it was somewhat holy. Even his bitter chrysanthemum face reflected an indescribable smile. Xiao Hua left the Shaoling Long Temple and walked towards the west side of the temple. The Shaoling Long Temple was located on a huge mountain range. The Shaoling Long Temple was located on the highest peak of the mountain range. Xiao Hua descended from the highest point of the Shaoling Long Temple. At this moment, he was walking along the mountain range of the Shaoling Long Temple. The path under Xiao Hua's feet couldn't be considered a mountain path. It was just some slightly chiseled stones. Moreover, these stones couldn't be seen clearly under the thick snow. However, the pious Xiao Hua stepped on the snow step by step. His feet emitted a zhi-zhi sound. This sound seemed to be the only sound between heaven and earth, causing Xiao Hua's heart to become increasingly calm. The further he walked, the stronger the wind above the mountain range. However, the flame of the oil lamp didn't seem to be affected at all. It didn't even sway. 999 zhang seemed to be very far, but after walking step by step, there would eventually be an end. At the end of the road was a small groove. Although there was some snow under the mountain wind, the snow had already been blown thin, revealing the dark mountain rocks. If one looked carefully, they would discover that the dark mountain rocks were different from the color of the mountain rocks outside the groove. This darkness was in patches, clusters, and threads. It should have been caused by the fire. Xiao Hua's gaze fell on this place. His eyes revealed compassion. He already knew from the Shaoling Long Temple's Buddhist scriptures that this groove was the place where the monks of the Shaoling Long Temple were cremated. In the past 10,000 years, more than 1,000 Buddhist children had returned to the West. The Buddhist fire that burned their remains had burned the mountain rocks at the foot of the mountain into a black color. Xiao Hua respectfully walked in front of the groove. He carefully bent down and prepared to place the old monk's remains on top of the groove. At this moment, a rather indifferent Buddhist sense swept over from a distance. It was like a clear wave overflowing from the top of the Shaoling Long Mountain. Oh, this Buddhist sense came abruptly. Xiao Hua didn't have time to change his clothes. However, he frowned. As his thoughts flashed, he immediately used the appearance-changing technique. A face with a small nose and small eyes appeared. It was precisely Zhang Xiaohua's appearance. However, in just a moment, Xiao Hua's idea changed again. The small nose became tall and straight, and the small eyes became big and spirited. He changed into another appearance. After changing his appearance, Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry. He simply placed the old monk's remains in the groove, put his palms together, and looked into the distance. However, although Xiao Hua was standing still, the Buddha's relic in his Niwen palace was busy. Just now, the Buddha's relic had roughly read through the Buddhist scriptures. Originally, it didn't intend to look at the records of the Pure Land's language. Now that it saw that someone was coming, Xiao Hua could only let the Buddha's relic quickly flip through the records. Who would have thought that after the Ling Qi sky was broken through, Xiao Hua's intelligence had undergone an earth-shattering change? Previously, he had spent a lot of effort to master the language, but in the time it took to eat a meal, he had already made progress. Xiao Hua's heart was wild with joy. and at the same time, he became more and more stable. Just when Xiao Hua was reciting and familiarizing himself with the language of the Pure Lands world, he heard a very unfamiliar roar of a beast. In the distance, a cyan cloud floated over like a cyan lotus. Above the cloud was a cyan lion several zhang in size. This cyan lion looked a bit strange. From head to tail, it had a pure cyan mane without any impurities. Even under its feet, there were 4 rather large cyan lotuses. That cyan lion looked very fierce. Its eyes, which were bigger than a fist, were flashing with cyan brilliance. Looking at the cyan lion again, a boy wearing a monk's robe was sitting cross-legged. The boy's lips were red and his teeth were white. His face had a kind of otherworldly appearance. The top of his head wasn't bald, but was instead clustered into 5 buns. On each of the buns, there seemed to be a golden token engraved with the golden body of Buddha. The boy wasn't empty-handed. In his left hand, there was a cyan lotus. On the long stem, there was a bowl-sized lotus that was blooming vigorously. The boy's right hand was holding a cyan sword. The sword was plain, and there was nothing special about it. Chapter 3404. The boy didn't come alone. About 10 zhang behind him, there was a strange bird flying. This bird was 3 zhang in size, and its 2 zhang long feathers were black and white. Even the waist and the roots of the wings were black, while the tips of the wings were pure white. What was special was that the bird's neck was very long, at least 5 chi long. This 5 chi long neck didn't have a single feather, and if one looked carefully, a faint bronze color could be seen from the depths of the neck. On the back of the bird stood a woman dressed in palace attire. This woman was in her 20s, and her appearance didn't seem to be particularly outstanding. She had large eyes, slightly coarse eyebrows, and seemed to have gone through a lot of hardships. Although her skin was extremely white, the hand holding the soft sword was very large. Even if there was a golden hairpin inserted into her cloud-like hair, it still wouldn't make people drool. About Buddha. The boy flew closer and saw Xiao Hua waiting there with his palms together. He also chanted the name of Buddha. This poor monk is Si Hui. How should I address you? This poor monk. Tipu greets great master Si Hui. When Xiao Hua heard that it was a monk of the Si generation, he couldn't help but be secretly surprised. He hurriedly bowed and replied. Monk Si Hui was surprised and asked curiously, Why are you called Tipu? Although you are of the tantric lineage, shouldn't you also choose a dharma name within my Buddhist lineage? Great master, Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. This poor monk was previously a Buddhist layman disciple and didn't shave his head and become a monk, so I don't have a real dharma name. Today was supposed to be a good day for this poor monk to shave his head, but this elder suddenly died, and he didn't have time to give this poor monk a dharma name. How is that possible? At this time, Si Hui's azure lion had already set foot on the mountain range of the Great Snow Mountain. Si Hui simply jumped down from the azure lion and walked to the front of the old monk's corpse to take a look. He turned his head and asked Xiao Hua, Since you're going to shave your head, naturally you should prepare a dharma name before today and fill it in the certificate so that it can be sent to Lane Temple to report. How come you don't have a dharma name when it's time to shave your head? This poor monk doesn't know either. Xiao Hua was still smiling. This poor monk did not come from the Great Snow Mountain. Today, I was just passing by the Great Snow Mountain and saw a small temple on the mountain. I wanted to come in and ask for directions, but who would have thought that this elder was already at the end of his life? In order to pass down the mantle of Tantra, this poor monk reluctantly shaved his head. In the end, before the shaving was complete, this elder had already passed away. Therefore, this poor monk still does not have a dharma name. Immortal friend Si Hui. At this moment, the woman riding the strange bird walked down from the sky and said with a smile, Whether it is the courtesy name of my Confucian cultivator or your Buddhist sex dharma name, they are just symbols. Could it be that a mortal friend wants to find a suitable dharma name for a mortal friend Tipu? Ba, this poor monk is too obsessed. Hearing this, Si Hui child immediately said with a smile, Si Hui is Ti Hui. Tipu is also Ti Hui. Many thanks for new Tanyue's reminder. There are very few Tantra disciples in the first place. This small temple on the Great Snow Mountain is even more difficult to find disciples, that woman said with a smile. I'm afraid that this master was fancied by this old monk as soon as he came to the Great Snow Mountain and hurriedly tricked him into the temple. Amiba, New Tanyue is too serious. Siai Hui did not get angry and said with a smile, to enter my Buddhist sect, one must have good roots. Without several lifetimes of cultivation, it is simply impossible to enter my Buddhist sect. This monk must also have Buddhist faith. Today, he was able to shave his head and enter Tantra. Naturally, that woman was already used to C.I. Huey's explanation. She said with a smile, you are the Buddhist sect's #1 strategist. Furthermore, you have the wisdom of 9 lifetimes. How can this little girl be your opponent? You can say whatever you want to say. Ba, New Tanyue is too serious again. C.I. Hui wanted to say something again, but thinking about the woman's judgment just now, she smiled slightly, shook her head, and looked at the old monk's corpse. That woman looked at Xiao Hua with a smile and asked, Little monk, let me ask you, just now, when the Great Snow Mountain golden body appeared, did it have anything to do with you? This. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment. He originally wanted to deny it, but after thinking about it again, this snowy mountain was extremely cold and there were no temples nearby. Moreover, these two people must have sensed the strange phenomenon just now and rushed over. How could he easily deny it? Besides, now he had a completely different face. Even if he revealed his Taoist cultivation, so what? Yes, it was the strange phenomenon when this poor monk was shaved. Xiao Hua simply admitted, Who is New Tanyue? Why don't you introduce yourself? Unfortunately, that woman looked at C.I. Hui with interest and did not answer Xiao Hua's question. Oh, when you shave your head, you have hundreds of miles of psychokinesis on your body. Hearing this, C.I. Hui faintly raised her eyebrows. Although it was a question, she was not particularly surprised. Hearing this, Xiao Hua was happy, but his face quickly changed into panic. He said in a low voice, This poor monk does not know. This poor monk only knows that when I was shaved, there was a very strong wind. Even the hair this poor monk shaved was blown away. At that time, the old monk returned to the west. This poor monk was in a hurry and did not pay attention to the range of the psychokinesis. Ba, this monk really has a foundation. I don't know which senior brother's reincarnation you are. C.I. Hui congratulated, but her eyes looked up and down at Xiao Hua and asked again, This poor monk only knows that Tantric Buddhism disciples all wear saffron monk robes. This poor monk does not know why this monk is wearing saffron Taoist robes. How would I know? Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and said, This is all this old monk's arrangement. If Grandmaster feels there is a problem, you can ask this old monk. Ask. C.I. Hui was very curious about Xiao Hua's rolling eyes and this question. It seemed to be different from the monks she usually saw. The woman at the side said in a timely manner, Fellow Taoist C.I. Hui, if fellow Taoist Tipu said so, I'm afraid you have already lost, right? Fellow Taoist not only wants to go to that place with this little woman, but also wants to invite fellow Taoist Tipu to go with you, right? Hearing this, a trace of a bitter smile appeared on C.I. Huey's face. She shook her head slightly and said, Ba, this is all because this poor monk's cultivation is not enough. The little bit of desire to win in my heart cannot be erased. Now, I have fallen into New Tanyu's trap. Fellow Taoist, you can't say that. The woman said with a smile, Meeting is fate. If you should not go to that place, I'm afraid you would not have met this little woman today, right? Moreover, if you should not go to that place, why would you make this bet with this little woman in order to leave? I'm afraid this is the only way to put it. C.I. Hui smiled bitterly again. This poor monk lost my mind. I actually only remembered that condensing the golden body requires psychokinesis, but forgot that the reincarnated senior also has psychokinesis when shave. The woman said with a smile, The conditions this little woman provided are also not bad. Could it be that you did not come for these conditions? Perhaps. Si Hui declined to comment. She turned to Xiao Hua and said with a smile, Monk, this poor monk has a good thing here. When Xiao Hua heard the two of them talking about that place, he immediately lost interest. He had just formed his nascent soul, and his Dao realm was not stable. He did not want to go to any dangerous place. What he wanted to do was to find a place to meditate. Moreover, the space meridian above the snowy mountain was unstable. If it was as Sun Jian said, he did not want to pass through the East Sea and South Sea. Then he must hurry back to the Xiaoyu continent before the space meridian collapsed. Not going. Xiao Hua shook his head like a rattle drum. Without waiting for Si Hui to finish speaking, he immediately shouted, This poor monk still has other things to do. After the old monk's skin is melted and his saraira is taken out, this poor monk will quickly leave this place. Leave this place? The woman's smiling face showed astonishment. Little Master is already a monk in this temple. If he does not cultivate here, where else can he go? Xiao Hua was speechless. He could not arrogantly say that this temple was built just to wait for him, right? He could not say that this temple had no meaning to exist when he came, right? Lazy little monk. Si Hui smiled. Your tantric sect is not prosperous. Now that you have just entered the tantric sect, your master has already returned to the West. Now you also want to abandon the temple and flee. This really makes this poor monk lament. Can't the cultivation of your previous lives make you wake up? I'm about Buddha. Xiao Hua also smiled. With Buddha in my eyes, which part of the Pure Land is not Buddha? With Buddha in your body, which part of your every action is not cultivation? With Buddha in your heart, which part of the mountain and stone is not a temple? Why did Great Master not painstakingly guard the lamp in the temple and come to the snowy mountain to be carefree? When Si Hui heard this, her expression slightly changed. She hurriedly raised her hand and said, Amit Bab Buddha, this poor monk was wrong. Although little monk has just shaved his head in this life, the root of wisdom of several lives is still there. This poor monk previously wanted to recommend little monk to other temples to cultivate. Now it seems that this was a big mistake. If Great Master is not wrong, then this poor monk is also not right. If there is right and wrong in your heart, how can it still be free of filth? Xiao Hua still answered with a smile, not bowing to salute. Si Hui's expression changed even more. He almost did not dare to believe his own ears. He lowered his head to look at the old monk on the wooden board, then raised his head to look at the calm and collected Xiao Hua. He took a few steps back, put his palms together, and said in a low voice, Amabab Buddha, this poor monk, has really learned something. Seeing this young monk's astonished appearance, Xiao Hua was quite proud. He did not feel that he could reach the realm of a senior monk like Si Hui thought, but many times he could see through things with the eyes of a bystander and speak out like this. And it seemed that every time Xiao Hua spoke out, he had the posture of shocking the world with a single brilliant feat. This also showed that no matter if it was Buddhism or Taoism, when one cultivated to a high realm, they would achieve the same result through different means. Si Hui lowered her head. Xiao Hua was proud. The woman in the palace dress next to him pursed her lips and smiled. She could not help but say, Fellow Taoist Si Hui, saying is one thing, doing is another. This snowy mountain is covered with snow all year round. If the sky could be as clear as today, the herdsmen of the snowy mountain would not have to live such bitter and cold lives. These words, you can say it, I can say it, anyone can say it, but who can do it? Chapter 34:05. Amitba, fellow immortal, has misunderstood this poor monk. Si Hui raised her head and looked at the woman. This poor monk is not stumped by this little monk's question. This poor monk is only thinking. This intelligent little monk, this Buddhist disciple of Tantric Buddhism with roots of wisdom. What should this poor monk do to guide him into the right path of Buddhist cultivation? Should this poor monk find an accomplished monk to teach him? Or should this poor monk do it personally? Xiao Hua was shocked. His gaze swept over the young monk, and he asked indifferently, "Could it be that this poor monk is so mischievous in front of Master?" Then this poor monk would like to ask Master, "What is the right path and what is the wrong path? You have yet to attain fruition, so how do you know which path is the right path? Even if Master has attained fruition, is your path definitely the right path? Is your right path definitely this poor monk's right path? Is I sure to attain fruition just because I follow your path?" Hearing this, C.I. Huey's face became even more bitter, as if she had a gold thread in her mouth. She lowered her head and chanted again, "Ba, seeing this little monk today, this poor monk thinks of this poor monk's past. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You don't know the vastness of the sea and sky. You don't know that there are many mysteries in this world that cannot be known by others. Humans are nothing more than dust in this world. What can cause clouds and rain with a flip of the hand? What can cause a dragon to fly in the sky with a flip of the hand? They are all absurd. Apart from arrogance, and contempt, what else can a human be? Only when one truly recognizes one's insignificance can one truly cultivate. The so-called cultivation is not how many Buddhist cultivation techniques one cultivates, or how many Buddhist secret techniques one cultivates, but how many Buddhist scriptures one reads, and how many good karma one bears. This poor monk even wants to say that the words in Buddhist scriptures can also kill, and only the spirit in Buddhist scriptures can let people live. In C.I. Huey's words, the first half made Xiao Hua sigh with emotion. It was exactly as he had thought, but the second half made Xiao Hua puzzled again. However, Xiao Hua could also see that C.I. Huey's words came from the bottom of her heart, and she did not hide anything. The first Buddhist expert that Xiao Hua met was Hanju. Hanju was a complete liar who tricked Xiao Hua miserably. Later on, Xiao Hua met a few more Buddhist disciples, and none of them left a good impression on him. Therefore, even the old monk who had just passed away was unable to completely change Xiao Hua's bad impression of the Buddhist sect. And at this time, C.I. Hui had just met him, and she was actually thinking so much for him, and was even distressed for him. This made Xiao Hua's heart vigilant. He didn't know what kind of medicine C.I. Hui was selling in her gourd. If I can understand the spirit in the Buddhist scriptures, even if I throw the Buddhist scriptures to the back of my head, I can still attain the fruit. C.I. Hui obviously didn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. She still said, "If you can't understand this spirit, then you should properly study the Buddhist scriptures and truly understand Buddha's great wish. Purely showing off and arguing, purely speaking words, you can only walk into a dead end. It can't even be considered a wrong path." "Grandmaster, you're overstating things, right?" Xiao Hua's heart gave birth to a sense of victory as he said indifferently. C.I. Huey's face was still distressed. It seemed that every word Xiao Hua said made her heart ache. It was like a knife stabbing into her heart. "Little monk, you don't need to say any more. This poor monk will ask you 3 questions. You see if they are correct or not." C.I. Hui asked very regretfully. "Grandmaster, please speak." Xiao Hua nodded. He wanted to see what this young monk wanted to say. "Your Buddhist cultivation technique has made quite a bit of progress. If this poor monk is not wrong, I'm afraid that you have already reached the Rugi realm." "Correct. What Grandmaster said is correct." Xiao Hua slightly frowned. He didn't want to answer, but after thinking for a moment, he still answered honestly. "You have studied very few Buddhist scriptures, so much so that this poor monk feels that you may not have even read a single one." Xiao Hua's eyebrows twitched. Before today, he indeed hadn't read a single Buddhist scripture, but in this short moment, he had already read half of the Buddhist scriptures in his Niwen palace. Xiao Hua looked at the woman, who pursed her lips and smiled. He sighed and nodded. "What Grandmaster said is correct. This is the 3rd question?" C.I. Hui turned to look at the woman and said with a wry smile, "This poor monk suspects that this little monk is not a Buddhist disciple of the Pure Land world." "What?" Xiao Hua was surprised and even more shocked. At the beginning, he spoke a bit slowly because he had adapted to the Pure Land world's language that was somewhat similar to the Sanskrit language. Now he was already extremely proficient. He believed that it was impossible for others to see through his origin, but he didn't expect that C.I. Hui would still see through him. Therefore, Xiaohua couldn't help but touch his nose and said with a wry smile, "Grandmaster, what do you mean?" "Little monk." The woman smiled, as if she was playing a double act with Ci Hui. "Fellow Taoist Ci Hui means you are just a monk who has just shaved his head. Even if you haven't heard of fellow Taoist Ci Hui's Buddhist name before. After all, he is a senior of the Sai generation. Look at your appearance. What grandmaster? Do Buddhist disciples call their seniors like that? Also, where did you get your Tipfa name?" "As far as I know, there is no such generation in the Pure Land world." When Xiaohua heard this, he already had an idea in his heart. He said with a smile, "Didn't Grandmaster Ci Hui say it just now? This poor monk has never read any Buddhist scriptures and also doesn't know any Buddhist seniority. I had just shaved my head before the two of you came to the Great Snow Mountain. Grandmaster Ci Hui looks so young, even younger than this poor monk. If it weren't for the two of you having great magical powers, this poor monk wouldn't have called him Grandmaster." Saying this, Xiaohua glanced at the azure lion and the strange bird that stopped not far away. "You don't need to say it." The bitterness on Ci Hui's face didn't decrease. He looked at the old monk on the groove and asked, "What is this elder's Buddhist name?" "This poor monk doesn't know." Xiaohua shook his head. When this poor monk came, he had already asked, but the elder didn't answer. At the same time, he also didn't give this poor monk any Buddhist name. "Tantric Buddhism, oh, Tantric Buddhism." Ci Hui sighed. This poor monk doesn't know what to say. Tantric Buddhism has been around for so long, it's unlikely that they would pass on the traitorous sutra to a little monk who has just entered the sect, right? "If Grandmaster doesn't want to say it, then don't say it," Xiaohua replied. "Wait until this poor monk incinerates the elder's body and takes out the elder's Sarira merit. You can start now." Ci Hui nodded. He took 2 steps forward and arrived in front of the wooden plank. He clasped his hands together and started to chant. His voice was very rhythmic. Although it wasn't loud, it clearly floated within 3 zhang, 33 m. Strands of Buddhist light were emitted from Ci Hui's body and slowly covered the old monk's body. Amipa. Xiaohua also chanted the rebirth mantra. He walked forward and lit the wooden plank with the oil lamp in his hand. The bright yellow flame on the wooden plank gradually rose and slowly wrapped around the old monk's corpse. Xiaohua's heart was somewhat desolate. This old monk had bitterly guarded this place for nearly 100 years. In the end, only this ball of flame accompanied him. Everything else had turned into smoke and dust floating in the air. "You can start now, little monk." Seeing that the flame was gradually growing bigger and Xiaohua was still chanting with his head lowered, Ci Hui couldn't help but remind him. "Start? Start what?" Xiaohua was greatly surprised. He stopped chanting and raised his head to look at Ci Hui. Ci Hui was stunned and blurted out, "Aren't you going to burn this elder Sarira?" Xiaohua's heart jumped. He knew that things weren't good. He hurriedly let the Buddha Sarira flip through the Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist scriptures. He braced himself and said, "After burning the elder's body, won't the Sarira naturally come out? Sai, let this poor monk do it. If we wait any longer, it will be too late." Ci Hui opened his mouth to explain, but looking at the flame, he could only pat his forehead. A Buddhist light flew out from the top of his head. Then his hands moved again. It was actually a Buddhist seal that Xiaohua had never seen before. "Little monk." The woman at the side was originally solemn with her head lowered. At this moment, she couldn't help but speak again. "Sarira is the foundation of the cultivation of a Buddhist disciple. Presumably, little monk should also have a Sarira, right? These bodhisattvas would use a Buddhist mystic art to condense their negative karma and merit into their relic before they left. When the Buddhist fire burned their bodies, the negative karma would condense into the relic and fuse with it. The Sarira can protect the Buddhist disciple's karma in this life and prepare for the Buddhist disciple's cultivation in the next life. And this elder looks very old. I'm afraid he doesn't have any Buddhist cultivation and is just an ordinary monk. These monks can't condense their karma and merit. Therefore, even if they can use the Buddhist fire to create a Sarira, it will be melted bones and other things. Other than being a souvenir and for people to admire, it has no other use. If you want to keep their karma and merit, you can only rely on external forces. And this kind of external force, to be honest, fellow Taoist CI, Hui doesn't have this kind of divine ability. He can only create a Saraira. And this Saraira isn't that Saraira. Xiao Hua suddenly understood and said with a bitter smile, "This poor monk really doesn't know." The woman glanced at Xiao Hua and shook her head slightly. "Looks like you really don't know. You only have the cultivation of the Buddhist sect." While speaking, CI Hui had already formed a seal with both hands. The Buddhist light emitted from his forehead condensed in the Buddhist seal, just like the 9 syllables mantra in Xiao Hua's mouth. Go, seeing the golden characters condense in the Buddhist seal, CI Hui raised his hand and lightly scolded. The golden characters the size of fish shone brightly and flew out from CI Hui's hand. The brilliance of the golden characters was extremely bright. Xiao Hua unconsciously closed his eyes. And at this very moment, something strange happened. The old monk's body that was originally lying motionless on the wooden board suddenly moved. The old monk's closed eyes also opened. His turbid eyes looked at the sky blankly. But in just a moment, the Buddhist fire and the Buddhist light were reflected in his eyes. The old monk's orange peel-like face unexpectedly showed a rare kind of gratification and relaxation, as if he had put down a heavy burden. His lips trembled slightly. Looking at the shape of his mouth, it should be Southern Gate, Mithriya, Buddha. However, without waiting for the old monk to open his mouth, the Buddhist seal in CI Hui's hand had already expanded from the size of a fist to the size of one zhang, covering the entire groove at the foot of the mountain. Boom! On the wooden board, the Buddhist fire on the old monk's body flourished and unexpectedly turned into a pair of third-grade lotuses, completely submerging the old monk. The old monk smiled. The turbidity in his eyes unexpectedly disappeared and a kind of clarity flashed. That relaxed smile and the satisfaction of getting what he wanted condensed on his face. Chapter 34:06. After the lotus-shaped flame flourished, it turned into 3 balls of flame and gradually disappeared. At the moment when the 3 balls of flame were extinguished, a faint shadow flew out from one of the flames. It was the old monk's soul. The old monk respectfully bowed to CI Hui and said, "Amit Ba, thank you, Venerable One." Immediately, the soul turned into thousands of fireflies and disappeared. Amit Ba, seeing this, Xiao Hua was delighted in his heart. At the same time, he was also sincerely convinced. Just a moment ago, in front of the main hall of the Shaolin Long Temple, he used the Buddhist sect's 9 syllables mantra, but it didn't have the slightest effect. Here, CI Hui formed a Buddhist seal and immediately helped the old monk cross over. "Thank you, Great Master CI Hui." Xiao Hua happily bowed and said, "If Great Master didn't help, I'm afraid I would have disappointed the elder. The elder's relics and other things can't be left behind. Take this relic." Looking at the place where the old monk's soul just flew out, a relic smaller than a little finger appeared. CI Hui said with a bitter face, "He introduced you to Buddhism, so he should be your guide. His karma. If you have magical powers in the future, you should help him eliminate it. Of course, this poor monk can't guarantee whether or not there is any karma in this relic. Yes, this poor monk knows. This female benefactor has already explained it." Xiao Hua looked at the relic floating in the air. The color was very turbid, and there were many different colors inside. It wasn't particularly pure. Obviously, the old monk's cultivation realm wasn't very high. Xiao Hua waved his hand and was about to take the Saraira. However, he had a thought and slowly walked over. He carefully picked it up with his hands and put it into his arms. After doing all this, he turned his head and asked CI Hui, "Great Master, this little monk has a question. I don't know if I can ask you." Hearing Xiao Hua call himself little monk, the bitter expression on CI Hui's face slightly disappeared. She nodded and said, "Monk, If you have something to say, please say it. The old monk has bitterly guarded the great snow mountain, so he must be someone with a tenacious mind. Similarly, I've heard the old monk say that he has studied Buddhism for nearly 100 years. So why is his saraira not as sparkling and translucent as others? Xiao Huan naturally didn't hold back and immediately asked. Earlier, Nu Tanyue had already said that the eminent monk who has the secret technique of our Buddhism sect can refine the saraira that he has cultivated all his life before he goes to the West. The process of refining naturally has the effect of eliminating karma. When the karma is gone, the saraira will naturally look very good. We explained, this elder does not practice mystic techniques and only studies Buddhist scriptures. He does not have the ability to condense his own negative karma. Therefore, it is not strange that the colors in the relic are mixed. However, for you, this kind of mixed color relic is the best. The old monk is your guide. Helping him get rid of his karma is what you should do. If you help him get rid of his negative karma, your merit will also increase. Even when you condense your golden body, his saraira can also be used. And in those saraira that have already been condensed, the simple negative karma has been eliminated. What is left is the heavy negative karma, which is not easy to remove. Even if you want to use it to condense your golden body, you have to be careful. Speaking of this, Hui was a little radiant. She said again, as far as little monk knows, your Buddhism sect has already fallen to a lower level. Now, in the Pure Land world, the Buddha Lord of my Lane Temple has passed down the Mahayana Buddhist scripture. Under this Mahayana Buddhist scripture, even an ordinary monk can condense saraira. Little monk understands. Thank you for your guidance. Xiao Hua didn't know what Mahayana Buddhist scripture was and what Hinayana Buddhist scripture was. He only slightly lowered his posture and then slightly muttered to himself as he prepared to say goodbye. But at this moment, there was a faint chanting sound in the distance. Then, a faint golden light flashed from the chanting and flew over the great snow mountain. Oh, Buddha's radiance illumination? Hui raised her eyebrows and raised her hand. The green lotus that she had just put away in her left hand suddenly appeared. The green lotus also emitted a deep chanting sound and flashed with a Buddhist light that seemed to be breathing. Whoosh! Like a sword of light, a strand of Buddhist light emerged from the golden light and entered the green lotus. Then, the golden light and the chanting continued to fly forward. Xiao Hua withdrew his gaze from the distant golden light and looked at the green lotus. He saw a Buddhist document that had already lost its Buddhist light and was quietly lying there. Hui put away the green lotus, reached out her hand, and picked up the Buddhist edict. She opened it and looked at it, then handed it to Xiao Hua and said, "Little monk, this Buddhist light shines through your big snow mountain. You are the only disciple of Tantra Buddhism here. You should accept this Buddhist edict." Buddhist decree? What do you mean? Xiao Hua stared blankly, somewhat at a loss. Can this little monk not accept it? The Buddha's light illumination is the way the Lane Temple sends out the Buddha's decree to all the temples in the Pure Land world. Hui was very patient and explained, wherever the Buddhist light passes, all the temples have to accept the Buddhist edict. You're a Buddhist disciple. Naturally, you have to accept it. But, speaking until here, Hui was somewhat embarrassed. Xiao Hua did not know how to accept the Buddhist light. Now, the Buddhist edict should be received by Hui herself. Xiao Hua not accepting it was not a big deal. There is no content. Hui pondered a little and said, Buddha Lord has decreed that if possible, every temple in my Pure Land world must send 1 or 2 disciples to Changsheng Town in hidden immortal continent. Hang. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, that woman was suddenly startled. She narrowed her eyes and looked at Hui. Hui's eyes flashed with a somewhat complicated expression. She looked at that woman and nodded slightly without saying anything. Your Buddha Lord is really good at scheming. That woman snorted coldly. Could it be that he really wants to build a 99 zhang tall golden body of Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva in Changsheng Town? Ah! Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows. His heart was overwhelmed with shock. This. Hui shook her head. This poor monk does not know the Buddha Lord's plan. This poor monk is only a Buddhist disciple. If he does this, that woman opened her mouth, seemingly having a lot of complaints. However, when they reached her mouth, they turned into helplessness, leaving behind only a trace of hidden bitterness. I'm afraid it will cause a huge wave. Little monk, quickly accept this Buddhist edict. This poor monk still has something to say to you. Hui did not dare to talk too much with that woman. She turned her head and passed the Buddhist edict to Xiao Hua again. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand. Master, this little monk does not have the ability to accept this Buddhist edict. This is your divine ability. You should keep it for yourself. This little monk will go back and recite scriptures in front of the Buddha. That woman could not help but laugh. She looked at Hui and said, Fellow Taoist Hui, you really made an unnecessary move. Forget it. Hui looked at Xiao Hua's shrinking appearance. Obviously, he was not prepared to accept the Buddhist edict. She smiled bitterly and said, Since you are not willing to accept it, this poor monk can only leave this Buddhist edict behind. Of course, you're the only monk in this snowy mountains temple. Moreover, you have just shaved your head. According to the Buddhist edict, you do not need to go to the longevity town. It is good that Master knows, Xiao Hua said with a smile. However, at this point, Hui changed the topic and said, However, this poor monk still has something to discuss with you. If Master wants to go to that place, then it is better not to mention it. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand, not giving Hui the opportunity to speak. However, Xiao Hua still underestimated Hui's persistence. Hui did not even look at Xiao Hua's waving hand and said, You have the root of wisdom. Moreover, when you shaved your head, there was a Buddhist vision. In the future, you will definitely be a pillar of my Buddhist sect. If you had a monk by your side to guide your cultivation, this poor monk would not say anything. After all, Tantra Buddhism is different from the other 12 sections. However, in the current situation, although you have entered my Buddhist sect, there is no one to guide you in cultivation. You are still in the same situation as before. You only have Buddhist divine abilities, but not the protection of my Buddhist sect's Dharma. You should know that Buddha is 1 foot tall, and the devil is 10 feet tall. Your cultivation is very easy to go astray. It is like a child with great strength holding a great killing weapon. If you're not careful, you will hurt others and also hurt yourself. This poor monk has also suffered a great loss before. Therefore, this poor monk does not dare to say that he is your senior. This poor monk only wants to ask you to follow this poor monk. This poor monk will tell you what he has learned. Hui's face was still somewhat bitter. Seeing this, Xiao Hua's heart warmed. In fact, Xiao Hua thought that if he did not accept the Buddhist edict just now, Hui could use it to threaten him. Hui could even use the name of a senior to ask him to follow. Of course, just now, Hui could also use the opportunity of refining the old monk Saraira to raise conditions for Xiao Hua. However, Hui simply ignored these opportunities. She only used a pleading tone to speak to Xiao Hua. She spoke very sincerely, as if she was an old friend who had known Xiao Hua for a long time and wanted to ask Xiao Hua for help. Xiao Hua had always been amenable to coaxing, but not coercion. Now that he heard it, he could not help but secretly ponder. In fact, what Xiao Hua was worried about now was that he did not want Hui and that woman to know his Dao sect cultivation. He did not want them to know his identity as Dao sect's Xiao Hua. As for what the two of them were planning, Xiao Hua was not afraid. Even if the two of them were nascent soul cultivators, Xiao Hua's Dao sect cultivation had completely recovered, and he had even advanced to nascent soul. Even if he could not beat them, escaping would not be a problem. Speaking of Yuanying realm being unstable, this was indeed Xiao Hua's misgivings. However, Xiao Hua's situation was different from others. Others only had one primordial spirit. If they wanted to stabilize their realm, they could only meditate. However, Xiao Hua had many primordial spirits. Any one of them could replace Xiao Hua in meditating. Even if the green-robed Xiao Hua entered the Yuanying realm, the effect would be better than Xiao Hua's. Furthermore, stabilizing one's realm was a gradual process. Xiao Hua had just advanced a nascent soul a few days ago, and there was no situation where his Dao foundation was unstable. He did not necessarily have to cultivate in seclusion. Traveling to the Pure Land was not necessarily a bad thing. At least he could see what the so-called Pure Land was like. The only thing that Xiao Hua was afraid of was time. He had to pass through as much as possible before the space meridian collapsed, and return to the hidden immortal continent as soon as possible. After all, the matter of Jiang country's recovery had just begun, and there would definitely be many places where he would need to appear. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua raised his head and said, "This little monk thanks Master for his kind intentions. This little monk wants to ask, where are you going? What do you need this little monk to do? How long will it take?" Chapter 3407. This, C.I. Hui hesitated slightly, looked at the woman, and said in a low voice, "This matter. Please explain it to me. Actually, it won't take much time. We're going to pay a visit to an expert from the Dao sect. If we can ask him to help, that would be for the best. I don't need to do anything. I just need to listen to immortal C.I. Hui's teachings." The woman had already thought this through and spoke without hesitation. If that expert from the Dao sect is unwilling to go, we may need to borrow a Dharma treasure from him. When that time comes, I will support that Dharma treasure. Little monk, you may need to use your golden body to exert some strength. How long will it take? Xiao Hua frowned. 1 month should be enough. The woman saw that Xiao Hua was a bit impatient, so she raised her eyebrows and replied indifferently. Xiao Hua muttered to himself for a moment. He knew that there shouldn't be any problems in a month's time. After all, when he checked earlier, the spatial meridian didn't show any obvious signs of collapse. However, Xiao Hua still said cautiously, "Master, if you want me to go, I have 2 conditions." "Hee, you little monk." The woman pointed at Xiao Hua and said, "Others can't follow immortal C.I. Hui even if they want to. Now that immortal C.I. Hui has taken the initiative to find you, it seems like he's begging you. No matter, little monk, just say it. This is what I'm begging you." C.I. Hui said indifferently, "I can go with Master, but if I feel that it's dangerous, I can leave immediately." Xiao Hua said in all seriousness, "My cultivation is limited and can't be compared to the 2 of you. Of course. How could there be danger?" C.I. Hui and the woman spoke at almost the same time. The woman was clearly a bit displeased. Xiao Hua ignored the woman's reaction and said, "The second condition is that I want to ask if Master knows Jinshan Temple's Silent Void Zen Master." Jinshan Temple's Silent Void Zen Master? C.I. Hui was slightly stunned. She didn't know why Xiao Hua mentioned Silent Void. She nodded and said, "Of course I know. Why are you looking for him? I've heard Silent Void Zen Master's teachings before and have some friendship with him. If you have something, I can tell you. Yes, even if you want to become his disciple. It's nothing. This little monk has been repeatedly instructed by the old monk that there are some matters that I need to discuss with Still Void Great Zen Master. Great Zen Master only needs to tell this little monk the location of Jinshan Temple." How could Xiao Hua tell the truth? C.I. Hui smiled. "What's so difficult about that?" He then explained the location of Jinshan Temple and said, "If possible, this poor monk can go with you to visit the great Zen Master." "Hee, thank you so much, Grandmaster." Xiao Hua smiled and bowed. "Since that's the case, can you come with us?" the woman urged. Xiao Hua looked at the wooden planks and other objects that had already turned into ashes, as well as the newly added fire marks on the grooves. He sighed and said, "Please wait for a moment. This little monk will return to the temple to take a look. If there's nothing missing, I'll immediately return with you too. Little monk, come back quickly." She waved her hand, and a strange bird in the distance let out a long cry and flew over to the woman. The woman floated onto the bird, and the strange bird spread its wings and flew up into the sky, waiting quietly. Seeing the woman leave, clouds appeared under Xiao Hua's feet, and he also flew towards Shaolin Long Temple. Looking at Xiao Hua's departing figure, we thought for a moment. Then she also flew onto the azure lion. Buddha clouds appeared under the azure lion's feet, and it landed beside the woman. Seeing we fly over, the woman couldn't help but grumble. Immortal friend Hui, didn't you say before that we would come over to take a look? Why are there so many problems? Is this little monk called Zhu Tepu worthy of your attention? Immortal friend, Hui sat on the azure lion and said with a smile, my Buddhist sect emphasizes karma the most. Since we encountered a Buddhist phenomenon here, then this Buddha must be related to this poor monk. Look at this little monk's sharp aura. It's exactly the same as this poor monk in the past. This poor monk really can't bear to see him walk the wrong path like this poor monk. Everyone has their own path. That little monk is right. The woman said somewhat disdainfully, your path isn't his path. You can't walk the path for him, and you can't hinder him from walking his own path. But if he has someone else's guidance, at least he won't walk the wrong path. We didn't mind, and said with a smile, moreover, didn't you see that he also knows the cloud riding technique? Your cultivation as a Confucian cultivator should be of some use in that place. This little monk is somewhat mysterious. When the woman heard Hui mention Xiao Hua's Confucian cultivation, she slightly frowned. Not only did he not call you senior, he also didn't call me senior, and I can't sense what grade his Confucian cultivation has truly reached. This is karma. Hui nodded. Perhaps this time, we'll need his help when we go to that place. I hope so. The woman slightly nodded, a faint sadness appearing in her eyes. He's here. While speaking, Xiao Hua's figure flew out from the foothills, and Hui said with a smile, he didn't ask about this matter before, but now that we're going together, we'll definitely have to explain it to him. That's natural. The woman said with a smile, there's nothing to hide about this matter. Since he's going, we'll naturally have to explain it to him. At this point, the woman frowned. The little monk doesn't seem to have a mount. You'll have to take care of him. Of course, I can't let you take care of him. Hui smiled and patted the indigo lion to Xiao Hua's side. Seeing the strange bird and the indigo lion flying over, Xiao Hua raised his voice. Master, this little monk can go now. But before we go, shouldn't you explain to this little monk where we're going? Of course. Hui said with a smile. I've already told fellow Taoist Xian about this matter, and asked her to explain it to you. Xian? Xiao Hua frowned, and immediately thought a princess by Hua, Xian, and said to himself, why are they both surnamed Xian? Could it be related to this woman, and by new country? However, Xiao Hua still smiled. Please explain, fellow Taoist X. It's nothing much, I'll explain as we walk. Xian looked at Xiao Hua, and didn't show any displeasure because of Xiao Hua's disrespect, and said, moreover, if it's convenient, I feel that this little monk should change into a monk's robe. This tantric monk's robe really doesn't look pleasing to the eye. That's true. Tantric disciples rarely walk in the Pure Land world. This little monk will attract a lot of attention. Hui also nodded, and asked, little monk, if you don't have an extra monk's robe, this poor monk has an extra one here. Xiao Hua touched his nose, looked at the monk's robe on Hui's body, then looked at his own yellow monk's robe, and said readily, if that's the case, then that's for the best. This little monk doesn't want to be stared at by others. Immediately after, Xiao Hua took the monk's robe from Hui and caught up with Xian again. After hearing about the place she was going to, Xiao Hua sat on the indigo lion's butt and followed the two people into the distance. In just the time it took to eat a meal, Xian had already explained the matter, but the more Xiao Hua listened, the more he frowned. Because according to Xian, she was going to invite Hui and a Tao sect cultivator by the name of Heaven Flipping Venerable to a secret place. This place was passed down from ancient times, and it was there before the Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sect joined hands to destroy the Tao sect. Moreover, this secret place was left behind by the Tao sect, and there were formations set up by the experts of the Tao sect, and there were even monsters that the Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sect didn't know about. What shocked Xiao Hua the most was that XIN wanted to go to this place for an immortal tool. Yes, that's right, an immortal tool that only immortals can use. As for XIN's identity, XIN didn't mention it, and Xiao Hua also asked, but XIN just smiled and didn't answer. Looking at XIN riding the strange bird, Xiao Hua sat on the indigo lion's butt and fell into deep thought. From XIN's words, Xiao Hua faintly smelled the scent of a conspiracy, because whether it was XIN's identity, the secret place, or the immortal tool, they all gave Xiao Hua a kind of uneasy feeling. In the Dawn Rain continent, Xiao Hua also encountered this kind of thing, and it seemed that every matter had a bad ending, and every bad ending made Xiao Hua feel like he had a narrow escape from death. Immortal tool, a magic tool used by immortals. Xiao Hua had never heard of it before in the Dawn Rain continent. Although Xiao Hua could already refine spirit tools, and he also knew the power of spirit tools, but he never dared to imagine the power and appearance of magic tools used by immortals. This XIN was obviously a Confucian cultivator, so how did she know the secret place? Why didn't she have any scruples about looking for that immortal tool? Great Master Ci Hui. Xiao Hua pondered for a long time, but he didn't have any plans, so he could only open his eyes and ask, Immortal friend Exit, what is her identity? You actually followed her to look for the immortal tool. Aren't you afraid of falling into her trap? At this time, Ci Hui didn't take out the green lotus and sword, but quietly sat cross-legged in front of Xiao Hua. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, she slightly leaned to the side and said with a smile, This poor monk also doesn't know what identity immortal friend Xin has. This poor monk met her for the first time in Qing Luan Mountain 70 years ago, and then we met a few more times. Although she was a Confucian cultivator, she didn't have any prejudice against my Buddhist sect, and we talked very happily, so we could be considered old friends. A few years ago, she sent a message to this poor monk, saying that she had a big discovery and wanted to invite this poor monk. This poor monk naturally gladly agreed. Because she wanted to make some preparations, she pushed it to these few days. As for the immortal tool, I only heard about it a few days ago. That thing is a Tao sect cultivator's treasure, and has nothing to do with my Buddhist sect disciples, so this poor monk only wanted to remind her. Since immortal friend Xin is already prepared, how about this poor monk accompany her? It's that simple. Xiao Hua was a bit flabbergasted. This Ci Hui seemed to be too unguarded, right? She didn't even know Xin's origin, yet she followed her and even pulled him in. Looking at Ci Hui, Xiao Hua was a bit suspicious whether this young monk was deliberately pulling him down. Chapter 3408. Looking at Xiao Hua's puzzled gaze, Ci Hui smiled and said, Little monk, sometimes you can't think too clearly about the matters of the world. If you think too clearly, you won't be able to do anything. This poor monk only knows that he is a Buddhist disciple and has no interest in that so-called immortal tool. And fellow Taoist Xin only invited this poor monk to help her break the formation. As for other matters, this poor monk really doesn't want to ask too much. The problem is, Xiao Hua was flustered and exasperated. Master, why are you pulling this little monk? This little monk still wants to cultivate in the temple. Xiao Hua was so anxious that he almost called this Xiao out. Ci Hui was still neither fast nor slow as she said indifferently, Little monk, is this your plan? No matter how this poor monk looks at it, you don't look like a Buddhist disciple who can cultivate peacefully? Then tell me, what is a Buddhist disciple who cultivates peacefully like? Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and asked in a bad mood. At the very least, you have to respectfully call other people senior. At the very least, you have to humbly ask other people about things you don't understand. At the very least, you have to get used to chanting scriptures under the lamp. Without waiting for Ci Hui to finish speaking, Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Senior, isn't it just a senior? What's so difficult about it? Before this little monk entered Buddhism, this little monk didn't call other people senior. Since you are a monk, then you have to be less impetuous, more steady, less suspicious, and more trusting. Ci Hui smiled cheerfully and said, "Since you are a Buddhist disciple, this poor monk won't ignore it. Whether you are from Tantric Buddhism, strict flower school, or other sects, this poor monk has the responsibility to properly guide you." Sai, forget it. Xiao Hua was speechless. Why did these words sound like he was reprimanding Xiao Jian? Now that karma came out of C.I. Huey's mouth, it actually made him seem so mischievous. However, thinking about how other things could be used to improve Jade, and how his Buddhist skills were not small, Xiao Hua could only lower his head. Seeing Xiao Hua admit defeat, C.I. Hui smiled and said, "Let's not talk about other things. This poor monk just saw the Buddhist phenomenon." Then, C.I. Hui began to talk about the Great Snow Mountain with Xin. She narrated the contents of the Buddhist scriptures, the illusions, and her experience. Moreover, there was a trace of the way of karma hidden in her narration. Xiao Hua didn't care at first, but as he listened, Xiao Hua's ears perked up. In the end, Xiao Hua also interjected from time to time. The two were actually debating. The hidden immortal continent was different from the Dawn Rain continent. Whether it was Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, or demons, the cultivation methods were all different. Although there were some methods to distinguish the cultivation level of each other, most of the time, this method could not be taken seriously. Even pressure, primordial thought, divine thought, and Buddhist awareness could not be used as the standard to measure the cultivation level of a person or demon. The only way to test the cultivation level was to compete. Therefore, Xiao Hua did not have an estimate of C.I. Hui and Xin strength. Similarly, the two of them also did not have an estimate of Xiao Hua's strength. Especially C.I. Hui, she could not perceive the depth of Buddhist cultivation level from Xiao Hua at all. However, even though Xiao Hua called himself a little monk, his bearing was so calm. It was very obvious that his strength was not inferior to her and Xin's. In fact, just from the fact that she could not perceive Xiao Hua's Buddhist cultivation level, C.I. Hui already knew that if Xiao Hua did not have a trace of Buddhist cultivation level, then he had strength that surpassed her. Although Xiao Hua kept saying that he had just entered the Buddhist sect, entering the Buddhist sect and having Buddhist cultivation level were two different things. Xiao Hua obviously belonged to the latter. And for Xiao Hua, a Buddhist disciple who knew Buddhist cultivation level but did not understand Buddhist doctrine, how could C.I. Hui not have the idea of feeding the tiger with her body? Wanting to rely on her earnest advice to let the Pure Land world have another Buddha with profound Buddhist doctrine and outstanding Buddhist techniques? Not to mention C.I. Hui breaking down Buddhist doctrine for Xiao Hua, and not to mention Xin urging the strange bird to fly in front of them. The mountain range below the three of them overlapped one after another. Let's talk about a secluded place in front of the three of them, which was currently bustling with noise and excitement. This was a foothill that was flourishing with flowers. From mountain peaks that were like weights poked out of the sea of flowers. The mountain peaks were also covered with green pines and green cypresses. The sounds of apes and birds chirping could be heard from time to time from the mountain peaks. Moreover, a burst of fog was like a veil swaying in the wind, gradually covering the entire mountain peaks. However, in just a moment, rays of sunlight were cast down from the thick clouds. It was like a huge light sword piercing through the fog. The fog rolled and rolled, revealing the mountain peaks and rocks. The sunlight passed through the fog and shone on the mountain stream. The mountain stream looked very deep, but a stream of mountain spring gushed out from various parts of the mountain stream, emitting a gurgling sound. It was like the weeping of a woman alone in her boudoir, but also like the flute playing by a Confucian scholar's lips. With great difficulty, the sunlight fell on the mountain stream's spring water. The mountain rocks in the spring water were rugged, shattering the golden light. Bits and pieces of crystal scattered on the surface of the water, making people feel intoxicated. The spring water gurgled as it fell into the mountain stream, and converged into a pool. The pool water was long, and there were duckweeds floating in it. Occasionally, one or two small fish with silver-white bellies would happily swim out from the depths of the pool. They drew two light lines on the surface of the pool before suddenly disappearing. The pool was located in the depths of the mountain stream, and the sunlight couldn't reach it. If the clouds didn't block the sunlight, wisps of water vapor mixed with white mist would seep out from the four walls of the mountain stream at some point in time, covering the pool as well. Seeing the mist that was as ethereal as immortal clouds appear, an old man in a green Taoist robe suddenly appeared on a protruding stone wall at the top of the pool. This old man's hair and beard were all white, and his face was thin. His eyes were slightly closed, but the two palms outside of his Taoist robe were abnormally white. Although he was very thin, the veins on his skin were clearly visible, like the veins of jade. Go! The moment the old man in the Taoist robe appeared, he slightly opened his mouth and let out a toad-like cry. Then, the white fog and water vapor above the pond rushed into his mouth like a waterfall. In a moment, the entire mountain stream was devoid of water vapor, revealing the dark green pond from before. Pooh! The old man in the Taoist robe did not stop. He patted his forehead, and a dragon-shaped brilliance rushed out from the top of his head. After the brilliance, a mist mixed with water droplets also roared into the sky, like a real dragon sitting cross-legged above the mountain stream. Go! After a moment, the old man in the Taoist robe opened his eyes and recited a mantra. The dragon-shaped mist suddenly stopped and instantly turned into thousands of water droplets that fell down, hitting the stone wall and the pond. Alas, water vapor convergence. Water vapor convergence. The old man in the Taoist robe looked at the water droplets that turned into mist. He sighed and said to himself, "This old man has already cultivated the water vapor convergence. But why can't I understand the meaning of this water vapor convergence? Is it possible that the water vapor convergence of Confucian cultivators has another essence? Is there a mystery that this old man doesn't know? This is impossible. The Liao family's cultivation method may have a problem, but the Tsang Long River's cultivation method can't have a problem, right? Their cultivation methods are similar with only minor differences. But since the cultivation method is correct, this old man's cultivation method also has no problem. Why doesn't this water vapor convergence have any special power?" As the old man spoke, he waved his hand, and a 2-foot-long nascent soul came out of the old man's head. The nascent soul was wearing a treasure armor and was holding a ruler that was a few inches long. The ruler gave off a cold blue light. As soon as the old man's nascent soul appeared, it immediately threw the ruler in its hand. Its two small hands rubbed slightly. A blue brilliance emerged from the nascent soul's hand. As the nascent soul waved its hand, the blue brilliance fell into the deep pool. Buzz! A burst of roaring sound came from the pool. The entire pool swelled up as if the whole pool was boiling. The nascent soul opened its eyes. Its starry eyes flashed with a green brilliance. Then the nascent soul raised its hand. The entire pool of water rushed out like a giant python. It was 100 times more arrogant than the water vapor and mist from before. Boom! With a loud sound, the pool of water hit the stone wall. The entire stone wall turned into powder, and half of the stone wall shook slightly. Then, like a child playing, the nascent soul controlled the huge anaconda to dance around the mountain stream and the mountain peak. Wherever the anaconda passed, whether it was the tough mountain rocks or the thick trees, they were all turned into powder. Occasionally, the birds that flew over the mountain stream were also crushed by the anaconda and turned into blood foam. AI. Seeing the water python's power, the old man's nascent soul didn't rejoice. Instead, he sighed and muttered to himself in a sharp voice, "Our Tao sect's simple spell is more powerful than water essence convergence. Why was our Tao sect destroyed by Confucian cultivators? That bullshit water vapor convergence is regarded as a classic by countless Confucian families, but in this old man's eyes, it is so childish and laughable." The old man's nascent soul seemed to be very depressed. It withdrew its hand, and the blue brilliance disappeared. The nascent soul sitting in the old man's hair also withdrew into the old man's body. Woo! It was as if thousands of waterfalls were pouring down. The water that was still raging in midair suddenly fell from midair. Not only did it cause the trees around the mountain stream to sway, even the water droplets splashed up from the mountain stream were comparable to a rainstorm. Just as the old man's nascent soul disappeared and he opened his eyes, a powerful divine sense swept across the sky and the mountain before landing on the old man's body. Who is it? The moment the old man sensed the divine sense, it was as if he had been bitten by a poisonous snake. He immediately flew up from the rock and ignored the water vapor that still covered the mountain stream. His face was filled with extreme shock as he looked at the source of the divine sense in disbelief and shouted, "Hee, who else could it be? Naturally, it's this old man." A thunderous voice came from the horizon. Chapter 3409. You? Who are you? The old man seemed to be unfamiliar with this voice and asked with a trembling voice. Then he clapped his hand without hesitation, and a fist-sized, dark green spider appeared in his hand. Puff! The old man opened his mouth, and a ray of blue light landed on the spider. The spider suddenly grew until it was several dozen feet long. At the same time the spider transformed, the old man's body also emitted a brilliance. When the old man landed on the spider's back, wisps of water vapor flew out from the spider's body. Like a fountain, they shot high into the air and landed on the mountain ridges around the mountain stream. Swoosh! Gently, like the sound of water, where the water vapor landed, streaks of water blue brilliance spread out in all directions. In just a short moment, the four mountains that were like weights were covered by the water blue brilliance. From a distance, this blue light looked like a spider web, and the spider under the old man was the owner of this web. Ah, little heaven-flipping brat, you're still so cowardly. You're just as the others said. There was no trace of the voice. Even though the old man spread his divine sense out for several hundred kilometers, he still couldn't see anything. However, this voice was so arrogant that it seemed to be right next to the old man. The old man's face became a bit ugly, and he coldly shouted, "Which celestial friend has come to visit my four-flat mountain? Since you're here, don't be so sneaky. Otherwise, don't blame this old man for not giving you face." "Ha ha ha, this old man wants to come. Do I still need you to give me face?" The voice laughed loudly, causing the blue light to tremble. "Rise." The old man sneered and waved his hand. A water blue brilliance rushed forward and turned into a flying sword of more than 100 feet in size. With a woo sound, it swept across the air. Although it didn't hit anything, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth exploded in the space of about 100 feet. The momentum was extremely vast. "Ha ha, little guy, this old man hasn't arrived yet. Why are you wasting your spiritual energy like this?" The voice still had a hint of mockery as it arrogantly laughed. "Could it be that you're welcoming this old man?" The old man in the Taoist robe bit his lip and spread out his divine sense. He was very cautious as he looked around. He didn't believe the words of this voice. Rumble! In less than half a cup of tea's time, the sound of rolling wind and thunder could be heard from the horizon. A group of gray clouds emerged from that place and flew toward the mountain stream with lightning speed. The old man in the Taoist robe looked at the cloud in disbelief. He quickly spread out his divine sense to see what was inside the cloud. However, just as his divine sense touched the cloud, an irresistible force came from the cloud and tore his divine sense apart. Up! The old man in the Taoist robe let out a miserable scream and quickly retracted his divine sense. His originally shocked face was now as white as snow. "Ha! Just you, a nascent soul cultivator. You dare to spy on this old man?" The voice like rumbling thunder came from the gray cloud. Who are you?" The old man in the Taoist robe stomped on the spider, and a green light surrounded the old man. Only then did he gnash his teeth and shout. As he spoke, the gray cloud had already arrived next to the four mountains. The cloud violently churned, and the face of a young man appeared in the air. The mouth formed by the cloud opened, as if it wanted to devour the four mountains. He said, "You don't need to know who this old man is. Even if this old man told you my name, you might not know it. All you need to know is that this old man is a Taoist cultivator, and you are a disciple of my Taoist sect. This old man is naturally a disciple of the Taoist sect, but this old man doesn't want to interact with other Taoist sect disciples. This old man only wants to cultivate in peace. Although fellow Taoist is a senior of my Taoist sect, you can't force me to do something I don't want to do." The old man in the Taoist robe wasn't afraid at all. He looked at the face formed by the cloud and coldly spoke. "Humph, since this old man was suppressed in the eye of the West Ocean, how did the Taoist sects of the three continents become so cowardly?" The face formed by the gray cloud snorted. "There are simply too many cowards like you. You only care about your own cultivation and never care about the lives of others. You hide the arrogant heads of our Taoist sect in your turtle shells. This is why those immature scholars of the Confucian sects and those shameless monks of the Buddhist sects can trample our Taoist sect under their feet. If you all had a strong heart, our Taoist sect wouldn't have fallen to this state." You. When the old man in the Taoist robe heard this, he was first stunned, and then, as if he had been struck by lightning, he stood there in a daze. He looked at the cloud with absolute astonishment and said, "You," several times. However, in the end, he didn't dare to call out this person's name. It was clear that this person's name was extremely famous, and he absolutely didn't dare to call out his name. I didn't think that after all these years, this old man's name is still so famous. Fantion brat. It seems like this old man found the right person to look for you today." The cloud seemed to be frozen in midair. Although there were gusts of wind, it couldn't blow away a single strand of cloud. The voice that was like rolling thunder was heard again and arrogantly. "Since you know who this old man is, there's no need to call out my name. The South Continent is the territory of that old monk. He has cultivated the 6 Buddhist divine abilities to the extreme. It's not easy for this old man to take the risk to come here. If you call out my name, that old monk might hear it." Hearing this, the old man named Fantion bit his lips slightly. His expression was uncertain as he stared at the cloud. No one knew what he was thinking. However, a moment later, a trace of mockery appeared on the old man's face. He let out a cold snort and said, "Senior, no matter who you are or why you're here, I'm not interested at all. In my eyes, there's only cultivation and the heavenly Tao. It's my luck to be able to enter the Taoist sect, but everything in the Taoist sect has nothing to do with me. The rise and fall of the Taoist sect isn't something I can influence, nor is it something you can decide. There's no need for you to say anything more. If you don't have anything else to say, please forgive me. I'm going to cultivate." After he finished speaking, the old man cupped his hands towards the clouds. Then, his body flashed with a blue brilliance as he descended towards the mountain peak below. "Ha ha ha!" The cloud didn't seem to be angry and only laughed wildly. "When this old man roamed the 3 continents, you weren't even born yet. You probably know my name, but you don't know my temper, right? To tell the truth, if it was in the past, this old man would immediately kill you because of what you said. Not to mention a mere nascent soul cultivator like you. Even astral and spirit-severing cultivators have to be respectful when they see this old man. However, since the Taoist sect has withered and you're a rare nascent soul cultivator in the 3 continents, this old man will tolerate you for a moment. What can you do?" The old man seemed to be absent-minded and turned a deaf ear to the cloud's words. His body quickly sank into the blue light and gradually disappeared. Damn it! When the cloud saw that the old man didn't listen to its orders and was on guard against it, it let out a roar of anger. The entire cloud was like a fountain in a mountain stream and violently swelled. Strands of cloud flowed up and down and quickly expanded. Gray light flickered and turned into black and white at the center of the cloud. The white light soared into the sky and the black light fell. In just a moment, The cloud that was only several tens of feet in size had expanded to several acres in size. Although it wasn't enough to completely cover the four mountains, the dark cloud's overbearing aura seemed to have substance as it charged towards the blue light between the four mountains. Looking at the water-blue brilliance again, it didn't show any weakness. After the old man in the Taoist robe disappeared, rays of brilliance overflowed from the four mountain peaks. The water-blue brilliance surged and roared like real waves. In a short moment, the water light under the clouds actually rose several zhang high. Moreover, as the water waves surged, the rhythm of the water light released by the four mountains gradually became consistent. Under the splendor of the water waves, a whirlpool as thick as a bowl was formed under the impact of the intense water light. Whoa! A sound that was even louder than the sound of flowing water came from these vortexes. A huge current of air descended from the sky, and the world's origin energy within several tens of kilometers of the surrounding mountains rushed into these vortexes. As if the wind was helping the waves, the light that was several tens of feet in height rose up once more and soared several tens of feet into the air. Kaka, heaven flipping brat, is this your rippling flood peak formation? From within the cloud, an arrogant voice filled with disdain sounded. It was like the ringing of a golden bell. You're truly a disgrace to my Taoist sect. Can you not use such fancy things? Although your water light looks extremely powerful, in reality, it has already broken down its power. If you meet a strong enemy, they will be able to destroy your weakness in one move. Your water light looks like gold on the outside, but it's rotten on the inside. Wong. The old man in the Taoist robe didn't reply. However, the tens of thousands of vortexes in the blue light began to vibrate. Before the voice could drift into the distance, the light that was mixed with the thin threads of white light rushed out from the vortexes. Tens of thousands of light pillars condensed into a light pillar that was several tens of acres in size and brazenly attacked the clouds that were also surging towards the ground. The light pillar's power was so great that the hissing sounds between the tens of thousands of small light pillars resounded throughout the world. Ha! Interesting. It seems like you still have some tricks up your sleeve. That old voice was still laughing loudly, as if he did not care about such a powerful attack. Sure enough, at the origin of the voice, wisps of pitch-black cloud threads reached down from the cloud layer like densely packed tentacles, welcoming the enormous light pillar. Before the pitch-black cloud threads could come into contact with a light pillar, more completely white cloud threads followed closely behind the black cloud threads and rushed out. Wisps followed by wisps, appearing very strange as they descended. Chapter 34:10. Woo-woo. When the light pillar collided with the cloud pillar, it didn't cause a huge wave. Instead, the sound waves that surged between heaven and earth suddenly disappeared, as if something had blocked the source of the sound. Looking at the light pillar that was as bright as a morning star, it seemed to be covered by dark clouds, or even polluted by cloud threads. The black cloud threads first touched the light pillar that was as thick as a bowl, then quickly spread downwards, annihilating the light pillar's aqua-blue brilliance. In particular, the weak cloud threads seemed to have the power of 10,000 caddies. When the light pillar's powerful attack came into contact with the cloud threads, it was blocked and couldn't advance even half an inch. The old man in the Taoist robe was slightly shocked. Then, the aqua-blue brilliance at the four mountain peaks flourished again. However, before the brilliance of the four mountain peaks could form a whirlpool to assist in the battle, the white strands of cloud rushed into the pitch-black strands of cloud, instantly dyeing the top of the gigantic light pillar into a grayish-white color. Shwa! Like the sound of a clear spring washing away sand and dust, or like millions of young silkworms swallowing mulberry leaves. Layer after layer of sound filled the sky. Looking at the light pillar that had just been covered, it instantly collapsed. Inch by inch, foot by foot, and foot by foot, it turned into nothingness. Strangely, The light pillar wasn't completely destroyed, but was instead sucked into the gray cloud threads. In a moment, the cloud threads grew bigger and thicker. This. The old man in the Taoist robe turned pale with fright. What method is this? Kaka, my Taoist sex methods are heaven-defying. How could a nascent soul cultivator like you know? The arrogant voice sounded from the clouds again. This old man has only recovered 10 to 20%. It's more than enough to subdue you. Senior. The old man in the Taoist robe was only dazed for a moment. Then he said coldly, Senior is my Taoist sex teacher, and I also know that Senior has been suppressed by Confucian and Buddhist cultivators for tens of thousands of years. No matter what, it's still a meritorious service to my Taoist sect, so I didn't dare to use my full strength for fear of hurting Senior. Just now, I've already made my thoughts clear. I only want to cultivate quietly, comprehend the will of heaven, and feel the will of the earth, and walk on the great path of Taoist cultivation. I don't want to participate in the battle between Taoists and Buddhists. Ha ha, heaven-flipping brat. That voice sounded like it had descended 10 feet into the clouds and was much louder. When a nest is overturned, there are no eggs left intact. Do you really believe in the benevolence of the Buddhist monks? Their benevolence is for those who are loyal to them. Even if they were to give a portion to those demons, they would never give it to us Tao sect disciples. Don't think that those hypocrites will let you go just because you fled to the pure land of ultimate bliss and the hidden immortal continent. Don't think that those old bald donkeys of the Buddhist sect will tolerate you if you stay in the Four Extremes Mountains. Your actions would be laughable in the eyes of others, and your thoughts would be childish in the eyes of others. You are only a nascent soul cultivator now. Wait until you reach a higher level of enlightenment and reach the leaving aperture stage. Then, let's see what those old bald donkeys are capable of. Do you know what it means to subdue demons? Do you know what Thunderbolt Wrist is? You will be the devil in the future. You will be the monster under the Thunderbolt Wrist. At this point, the voice could not help but sigh. Back then, didn't I have the same thoughts as you? I thought that as long as I cultivated a supreme divine ability, I would be able to lead the 3 continents and revive our Tao sect. However, I was wrong. Although a single person's strength can reach the heavens, there is more than one person who can reach the heavens. That is why it is difficult to do things alone. Before I could cultivate to the great success stage, the Confucian cultivators and the Buddhist sect found out about me. Even 1,000 demons' sacred realm intervened. I don't want to talk about the specific details, but I believe there are many legends about me in the 3 continents. Therefore, when I escape this time, the first thing I want to do is to recover my cultivation. The second thing I want to do is to unite the Tao sect cultivators of the 3 continents. I want to gather all the strength of our Tao sect to fight against the Confucian cultivators and the Buddhist sect. As long as the Tao sect rises, I will be able to reach the great success stage. Only when I reach the great success stage can the Tao sect rise. As the voice came out of the clouds like a gust of wind, the black and white clouds of the devouring light pillars slowed down. Rather than saying that it was devouring, it was more like a deterrent to the Tao sect cultivator named Overturn the Heavens. Unfortunately, Overturn the Heavens only pondered for a moment before saying faintly, I am just an ordinary Tao sect cultivator. I only want to learn divine abilities and be free in the world. I am not interested in the battle between the Confucian and Buddhist sects. Moreover, I have many good friends in both the Confucian and Buddhist sects. They all know what I am thinking. I don't think I will end up like you, in the state of being unjust and lacking support. You are a man of great talent and vision. You should find other Tao sect cultivators who are as ambitious and idealistic as you. I only want to stay in a corner. You? The voice roared, causing the clouds to sway violently. Little Overturn the Heavens. Don't think that I don't have any generals to send. Don't think that I don't care about your little bit of cultivation. Don't think that I don't know the little tricks you have in your heart. Overturn the heavens. Overturn the heavens. Didn't that mean overturning the heavens of the 3 continents? Do you think that no one would know that you're trying to hide something? Flipping Sky's voice was still indifferent. Flipping Sky is just a Taoist name. There will be 100 interpretations among 100 people. According to what Senior said, it should be a complete upheaval, right? It can't be overturn the heavens, overturn the heavens, overturn the heavens, but it means to freely overturn the heavens and earth. There's no point in saying anything more. This old man has already tolerated you for a long time. The reason why I'm not willing to kill you is that you're a talented cultivator with great potential in my Tao sect. Moreover, you're in the Pure Land world and your identity isn't eye-catching. I want you to do something for me. Since you don't like toasting, then this old man can only let you taste the taste of a forfeit. After saying that, the black and white clouds suddenly emitted a bright light and pressed down several times faster than before. The splendor of the blue light pillar suddenly dimmed by a lot. Your Excellency, you're forcing my hand. Flipping Sky's voice was not afraid, and he also changed the Senior to Your Excellency, as if Flipping Sky had other means to fight to the death. Ha ha ha. Little Flipping Sky, this old man has already said what needs to be said. If you're willing to die together with this old man, then it's your honor. But since this old man dared to come, why would I be afraid of your insignificant means? Flipping Sky snorted coldly. Ka. A strange sound came from the depths of the blue light, and then layers of pale light emerged from the blue. In an instant, the light pillar that was more than 10 acres in size actually condensed into a white ice pillar, and an indescribable coldness was emitted from this ice pillar. This coldness was so terrifying. Not only did the vegetation and rivers within the 4 mountains more or less turn into ice beads, even the surface of the mountain rocks had crystallized. As the light pillar condensed into an ice pillar, the devouring of the black and white clouds came to an abrupt stop. Layers of clouds rolled on top of the ice pillar and could not press down even half an inch. Not only that, with a loud woo sound, the ice pillar that was more than 10 acres in size slowly shook, and the pale white splendor overflowed rapidly. A fist that was more than 10 acres in size gradually took shape and punched towards the huge cloud in the sky, as if it was going to shatter the sky with a punch. This is the ice bead, right? The voice in the cloud sneered. This thing is merely a pellet in this old man's eyes. You, use your sea-measuring ruler. Only your natal magic weapon can resist this old man for a moment. Flipping Sky's expression was as usual, and he was not moved at all. He did not even say a word, and only focused on urging his mana. Following this sneer, the huge cloud layer suddenly shrank, and the black and white clouds condensed together once again. The clouds rolled, and the wind howled. However, other than the howling of the wind, the clouds did not emit any power, and even the brilliance commonly used in Tao sects' remarkable powers did not appear. Compared to the punch below the clouds, which had the power to destroy the heavens and earth, the difference was too great. Below the clouds, the frozen fist shot up 1,000 feet, and every strand of ice that flickered with a pale white brilliance contained a huge amount of heaven and earth's spiritual energy. Below the ice pillar, a white bead the size of a bowl was spinning around. Below the white bead, there was a 3-foot baby that looked exactly like Flipping Sky. His face was flashing with a green brilliance, and his chubby hands were trembling slightly as he rubbed them together. The ruler that he was holding previously had disappeared. When the clouds had shrunk to a certain extent, they suddenly became transparent. Inside, an exceptionally bright white and black brilliance was born, just like 2 different colored suns. As soon as the brilliance was born, the clouds instantly stopped shrinking and then rolled at an extremely fast speed. A huge black and white hand, several acres in size, was formed from the clouds and grabbed towards the huge fist that was soaring into the sky. Puff! The huge hand grabbed onto the huge fist, and there was a loud noise. Countless waves of air rolled, and the spiritual energy that had gathered in the sky instantly turned into a gust of wind that whistled and blew away. Within hundreds of miles, sand and pebbles were blown away, and everything was chaotic. Not only that, Although the huge fist was unusually cold and contained a terrifying amount of heaven and earth's spiritual energy, once it came into contact with a huge black and white hand, it immediately melted like an ice pillar under a raging fire. Almost as soon as the palm landed, the fist disappeared, and in the blink of an eye, more than 40% of the ferocious fist had disappeared. Yin Yang Illustration Handbook. Not only did you break free from the Yin Yang Illustration Handbook suppression, you actually refined it? An extremely surprised and small voice cried out in disbelief. Under the huge fist, Flipping Sky's Yuanying's face was pale, and a stream of light blue blood was seeping out from the Yuanying's mouth and nose. The ice bead that was previously the size of a bowl on top of the Yuanying's head had now turned into a thumb-sized ice dregs. It was even lighter than a goose feather as it floated in mid-air, as if the huge hand had not only destroyed the ice pillar, but also the ice bead under the ice pillar. Chapter 34:11. Keek Keek. The voice was very proud, its laughter resounding through the heavens and earth. It shouted, "My Tao sect is a sect that seizes the good fortune of the heavens and earth. How can Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sects be compared to it? Although my Tao sect was destroyed by them, their divine abilities and methods will forever be unknown to them. Although this old man was suppressed by them due to a moment of carelessness, this old man also profited from the disaster and had the opportunity to use my Tao sect's supreme secret technique to entrust my primordial spirit to the Yin Yang Illustration Handbook. Now that this old man has an immortal and indestructible body, who in this world can be my opponent? Primordial spirit entrusting technique? Fantian's nascent soul had already slowly sunk into his body. Fantian slowly opened his eyes and asked himself in confusion. Obviously, he didn't understand what the primordial spirit entrusting technique was. The primordial spirit entrusting technique is a secret technique left behind by the immortal realm. How would a mere nascent soul cultivator like you know? Have you seen this old man's methods? The voice shouted coldly, and the big hand suddenly opened up, instantly expanding by several times. It didn't care that he had already destroyed 40% of the icicles and covered the entire 4 mountains. He said, "Follow this old man. If you succeed under this old man will definitely help you become an immortal after my Tao sect prospers. This old man can also teach you this secret technique from the immortal realm." As he said that, a fiery red pill the size of a thumb flew out from the big hand and landed in front of Fantian's eyes. Fire God pill. This is for the nascent soul to leave the body. Fantian saw this pill, and his face flashed with shock. A strange look couldn't help but drift across his eyes. That's right, this is the fire god pill that this old man refined. It's really suitable for cultivators like you who practice water-based techniques to leave the body. You bumped into this old man. This is your chance. Of course, it can also be said that this old man's escape is your good fortune. This is a chance given to you by the heavenly Tao. Other than this old man, in these 3 continents, who else can easily refine the fire god pill? Who else can so easily bestow the fire god pill to you? You really want to bestow the fire god pill to me? Fantian's tone had already softened. What do you want this old man to do? Very simple. Very simple. It's as easy as lifting a finger for you. The voice was resolute and unquestionable. It's just that this old man can't say it now. You'll know when you follow this old man. As he spoke, the giant hand made a grabbing motion. The entire ground shook, and the 4 mountains seemed to be uprooted from the ground. Sigh. Flipping Sky looked at the fire god pill in front of him, then looked at the violently shaking icicles and the 4 trembling mountains. With a sigh, he really couldn't resist this temptation. After sighing, he opened his mouth and spat out a breath of clear air onto the ice seed pearl. Buzz buzz. The ice seed pearl, which was originally like ice dregs, began to rotate. Waves of brilliance splashed out and gradually turned into a sparkling and translucent white pearl. The splashed brilliance fell on the icicles, and the entire icicles collapsed with a loud bang. This collapse was very strange. It was from the outside to the inside. The outermost part of the icicles that connected to the four mountains was the first to melt. Woo! Without waiting for the icicles to completely disappear, the giant hand made a grabbing motion in midair. The icicles between the four mountains, along with Flipping Sky himself, were all caught by the giant hand. Amidst the howling winds, the dark clouds rolled and flew into the distance. In a moment, they disappeared, leaving behind only the four bare mountains and the mess between the mountains. Just as the dark clouds passed, there were immediately thousands of gusts of wind descending from the sky. The chi of heaven and earth within a few hundred miles surged back and forth. After a full half a day, the wind stopped. However, the countless chi of heaven and earth in this space had already triggered a celestial phenomenon. When the wind stopped, the dark clouds were densely gathered again. Without waiting for the moonlight to shine, there was a heavy downpour. Hail the size of a fist poured down, covering the area within 100 miles, especially between the four mountains. The sky was pitch black, but within the pitch black, there was a kind of transparency. That transparency was the layers of water light. Flipping Sky's ice seed pearl condensed the water-based chi of heaven and earth within a few hundred or even 1,000 miles. The giant hand formed by the Yin-Yang Illustrated Handbook suddenly absorbed the chi of heaven and earth, causing a loss of the chi of heaven and earth. The Grand Duke of Heavenly Tao, the surrounding chi of heaven and earth gathered here. How could a normal celestial phenomenon withstand so much water-based chi of heaven and earth? Now, the chi of heaven and earth had all condensed into hail within the raindrops. It fell crazily, and a rare mountain torrential rain suddenly appeared. Fortunately, Flipping Sky was cultivating in the wilderness, and there were no traces of people. Within 10 days, the wind and rain were dense, and there were no casualties. Another 4 to 5 days passed, and the wind and rain stopped. It was a sunny day, and the sound of waterfalls could be seen from the four mountain peaks. It was already another paradise. Especially between the mountain peaks, there were large and small ponds and lakes everywhere. Even if Flipping Sky came back again, he probably wouldn't be able to recognize the earth-shaking changes here. Since even Flipping Sky couldn't recognize this new scenery, then Xian, Ci Hui Boy, and Xiaohua, who was accompanying Ci Hui Boy from afar, wouldn't be able to recognize it. The two beasts stopped in midair, and Xian floated down from the strange bird. She stepped on the auspicious cloud and landed in the middle of the four mountain peaks. She released her Yuan Shun and looked at it again and again. She reached out her hand and took out a diamond-shaped crystal object. Although she held it in her hand, she hesitated and didn't release it. Ci Hui Boy saw Xian's doubts and also jumped down from the azure lion. She flew in front of Xian and said with a smile, "Xian Tanyu, is there anything wrong? You didn't hesitate at all along the way, and there was no deviation at all. Why did you stop here? This is the communication magic tool of the Taoist fellow immortal, right? Why didn't you send it out?" Xian smiled bitterly and turned to look at the water under the scorching sun. She said, "Ci Hui immortal friend, release your Buddhist awareness to check it out. Of course, if you have a Buddhist magic like Heavenly Eye, you can also use it. You can find some clues at that time." "Oh." Ci Hui raised her eyebrows and didn't release her Buddhist awareness. Instead, she said with a smile, "Since Tanyu's found something wrong, why don't you tell me? Why do I have to do something unnecessary?" Hearing Ci Hui's words, Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A trace of helplessness flashed on her face. She said, "You Buddhist disciples are good at everything except this. You don't have any curiosity. Didn't you see the great change in the chi of heaven and earth here? The pond between the four mountain peaks are also newly formed? Don't tell me you don't want to see for yourself what caused such a huge change. I don't want to. We still smiled and replied faintly. There are 10,000 truths for everything in the world. The truth of every matter is different. Outside of this truth, there are also endless illusions. But if the world only sees illusions, who can discern the only truth? Even if I have heavenly eye or destiny connection, I can't see all the truths one by one. Amitabha, only my Buddha knows all the truths. If my Buddha lets me know, I don't need to pray, I will naturally know. But what if my Buddha doesn't let me know? Even if I wear out iron shoes, it's absolutely impossible for me to know the truth. See, Xin didn't have any reaction facing Ci Hui. She seemed to be used to these words. But Xiao Hua, who was lazily staying on the back of the azure lion, was suddenly stunned. That beautiful face flashed in his mind from time to time. That unforgettable voice sounded again. TCH, brother-in-law, is really a miser. Actually, in my opinion, the most beautiful thing in this world is none other than a confusing secret. All the secrets are hidden behind countless false appearances. Finding the essence of the matter from these fragmented clues is the most beautiful thing. Seeing Xiao Hua stunned, Hui's face showed a trace of a gratified smile. Her words weren't said to Xin. Although Xin was a Confucian cultivator, her attainments in Buddhist principles were admirable even to Hui. Although this kind of Buddhist principles were profound, Hui didn't think that Xin wouldn't understand. Hui's words were deliberately to help Xiao Hua. Along the way, Xiao Hua left a very good impression on Hui. Xiao Hua was originally a curious person. He liked to get to the bottom of ordinary matters. Now that he met Hui of the Buddhist sect, how could Xiao Hua, who had always been puzzled about Buddhist principles, give up such a good opportunity? From a beginning with a smattering of knowledge to now with a rough understanding, Xiao Hua's attainments in Buddhist principles were absolutely advancing by leaps and bounds. Hui certainly didn't know that Xiao Hua had a Buddha Sarira in his Naiwan palace that was reciting the Buddhist scriptures of the exquisite temple day and night. Moreover, after Xiao Hua discovered the spiritual energy, it seemed that his spiritual cavities had opened up. Whether it was the comprehension of Taoist techniques, Buddhist principles, or even the cultivation of Devil World's blood drop paradise, his progress was extremely fast. This made Hui feel that Xiao Hua was an extremely intelligent Buddhist disciple. And the convergence of psychokinesis on the snowy mountain made Hui more and more aware that Xiao Hua was the reincarnation of a senior monk with extremely heavy roots. Along the way, Hui also talked about Buddhist principles with Xiao Hua without reserve. At this time, he encountered an excellent opportunity, so he naturally wouldn't give up. He casually talked about things and enlightened Xiao Hua on the essence of Buddhist principles. Unfortunately, Hui couldn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. No matter what, he didn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. Jiuxia's words and Hui's words are all referring to the essence and appearance of all things in the world. As the saying goes, different Daos cannot work together. The two people's thoughts and actions are so different. However, what is the real relationship between the two? Everyone has their own reasons. I don't know where Jiuxia came from, but he emphasized on taking the initiative, seeking the first opportunity in all things. It's somewhat similar to my Taoist sect's cultivation method, which only strive for the vitality between heaven and earth. And we came from Buddhist sect, which emphasizes tolerance, obedience, and doesn't seek to stand out in all things. My thoughts are naturally in line with Jiuxia's. However, Buddhist sect is the same as Taoist sect's cultivation path. How can my knowledge be inferior to Taoist sects? Even if it's different, it's still another path. Now that I want to cultivate both Buddhist and Taoist techniques, where should I go from here? Chapter 34:12. You'd better welcome your Buddhist senior. Xin saw a flash of understanding in C.I. Huey's eyes and knew that he had gained something. She smiled and said, "Perhaps this senior can give you more guidance." A roar that sounded like a lion's roar came from afar, and a purple cloud drifted over. On the cloud stood a purple-haired hoe that was twice as tall as the azure lion. The purple-haired hoe's purple hair was several feet long, fluttering in the wind. On the ferocious beast's head, there was no fierceness in its fist-sized eyes. Instead, it had a very warm gaze that made people feel comfortable looking at it, especially when it shook its head. There was a large collar with 2 silver bells around its neck. The clang, clang, clang sound was even more pleasing to the ears. On the purple-haired hoe's back was a tall monk. The monk's face was simple and unadorned. His eyebrows were white, and the half-foot beard below his chin was also mixed with gray. The monk wore a gray monk's robe with a scabbard hanging from his waist. One of his hands was placed in front of his chest, and the other was holding a demon-subduing pestle that was as thick as a duck egg. The monk's eyes were like stars. He didn't look at C.I. Hui, Xin, and Xiaohua. Instead, he looked at the 4 extremes mountains with puzzlement like Xin did before. Ba, Junior C.I. Hui of Green Lotus Temple greets Senior. C.I. Hui didn't dare to be negligent. Before the monk withdrew his gaze, he stepped forward and bowed with his palms together. Seeing C.I. Hui step forward, Xiaohua also braced himself and bowed. Junior Bodhi of Small Exquisite Temple greets Senior. However, Xin wasn't in a hurry to go over. With a smile on her face, she waited for the Buddhist disciples to greet each other. The monk nodded slightly and said, "I'm Gu Zhen of Red Lotus Temple. Are you here to find Dao Sect's Venerable Fantion?" Hearing the old monk say his Dharma name, C.I. Hui didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly replied, "Grandmaster, yes. We're here to find Venerable Fantion for some matters." "What's the matter?" Gu Zhen frowned and asked faintly, "You're a Buddhist disciple. Why are you so close to the remnants of Dao Sect?" "This." C.I. Hui was a little embarrassed and said in a low voice, "I don't know Lord Fantion, but I came here with this female Tanyu. I am Xin, a Confucian cultivator." "Greetings, Grandmaster Gu Zhen." Xin didn't show any uneasiness on his face as he stepped forward and bowed. Which sect is this little girl from? Or which up-and-coming aristocratic family?" Naturally, Gu Zhen knew a little about the hidden immortal continent. Hearing that the surname, Xen, was not a special family of Confucian cultivators, he nodded and asked. Xin smiled and said, "This one's birth is not worth mentioning, so it's best if I don't make a fool of myself. Fellow Taoist C.I. Hui and this little monk were all invited by me. They don't know Venerable Overturning Heaven. However, may I know why Grandmaster Gu Zhen is here?" Gu Zhen glanced at Xin and said with a little dignity, "Venerable Overturning Heaven is a Dao Sect disciple. Although he has always been very disciplined, he is still a cultivator of the 4th level of Essence Qi. Now that the remnants of Dao Sect are said to be rising from the ashes, this old monk was ordered by the abbot to take a look and remind Venerable Overturning Heaven not to make a mistake and enter the abyss of eternal damnation. The 3 of us also arrived here half an hour ago." Hearing this, Xin knew that things were a little strange. She didn't dare to make excuses and hurriedly explained, "The 4 extreme mountains are completely different from before. Venerable Overturning Heaven is also missing. Oh, right, this one hasn't released my communication magic tool yet." Gu Zhen smiled and waved his hand. "Why don't you try releasing that magic tool?" "Yes." Xin flipped her hand and threw the rhombus-shaped magic tool into the air. Puff! Xin spat out a mouthful of true qi on it, and the rhombus-shaped magic tool slowly melted into a pool of green water. The green water flickered with light and was about to condense into the shape of a sharp arrow. However, before the arrow could condense, puff, 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 puff. With a series of chaotic sounds, the green water turned into hundreds of bubbles. "Oh, Xin raised her eyebrows in astonishment. Then, puff, 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 puff. The hundreds of bubbles burst one after another, and the green water disappeared into thin air. Venerable overturning heaven actually died? Xion's expression changed greatly. That's strange. Guzhan's brows furrowed. The changes in the four extreme mountains were obviously caused by Taoist cultivators. Venerable overturning heaven was a Taoist disciple with fourth grade essence force. How could they be so ruthless? Taoist disciples are always scheming against each other. Who knows what they're thinking? Perhaps Venerable overturning heaven wasn't very sociable and was ostracized by the Taoist disciples. Then they killed him. Xion's expression slowly returned to normal as she said faintly. However, Guzhan didn't agree and shook his head slightly. New Tan Yu's thinking is too simple. Although it was an internal conflict between Taoist disciples, for a fourth grade essence force cultivator to be killed so easily, his opponent must be a fourth grade essence force cultivator or even higher. Since when did Western Paradise have such a powerful Taoist cultivator? Xen smiled faintly. This isn't the hidden immortal continent. There aren't any unfamiliar Taoist experts here. Even if this Taoist expert was a ninth grade essence force cultivator, what does it have to do with me? Guzhan's figure was huge, taller than ordinary people by more than half. His hands that were exposed outside of his monk robe were like palm leaf fans, and the demon's subduing pestle in his hand was several times larger than usual. His bell-like eyes swept across Xen, but she couldn't see his expression. However, Xion's body trembled slightly, and she hurriedly lowered her head as if she was frightened. After that, Guzhan paid no further attention to Xen and flew to the center of the four extreme mountains. The purple-furred hoe also shook its head and followed behind, completely ignoring the azure lion and the strange bird. Roar! Seeing the center of the four extreme mountains, the purple fur hoe let out a loud roar that shook the surroundings. Guzhan waved his hand and placed the thick demon's subduing pestle on the purple fur hoe's back. Roar! The roar was even louder than the purple fur hoe's. Guzhan's roar was very powerful. Wherever the sound wave passed, Xion's true chi swirled around her body, and strands of golden clouds emerged from her palace dress. The clouds slightly overflowed in the sound wave and protected Xion. Xion frowned slightly and asked in a low voice, "This is the Buddhist lion's roar. Grandmaster Guzhan, is this a warning?" Grandmaster Guzhan seems to be using some Buddhist divine ability. The power of this divine ability should be very strong. Hui's face was still filled with respect as she answered in a low voice. This lion's roar is a warning to the Taoist cultivators who might be hiding nearby to quickly show themselves if they don't have any evil intentions. Should we leave for a moment? Xiaohua looked at Guzhan in the distance with interest and asked with a smile. As soon as Guzhan appeared, Xiaohua immediately greeted him. Unfortunately, Guzhan showed no interest in this little monk and didn't say a word to Xiaohua. Hui nodded. Grandmaster Guzhan's warning is naturally a warning to us. Let's leave this place first. With that, Hui stepped onto the indigo lion. The indigo lion didn't back down and let out a roar. Then, it waved its tail and flew out of the four extreme mountains with Hui. Xen got on the strange bird, and Xiaohua also stepped onto an auspicious cloud and slowly flew out. Woo! As soon as the three of them flew out of the mountain, the Buddhist light in the four extreme mountains shone brightly. Guzhan's body grew bigger and bigger. Then, a Dharma body comparable to the mighty Vajra emerged from Guzhan's body. Roar! At this moment, the purple-haired hoe let out a loud roar and flew a few hundred feet away from the Dharma body. Then, he opened his mouth and a fist-sized alms bowl flashed with faint Buddhist light and rushed into the air. Seeing the alms bowl slowly fly to the front of Guzhan's Dharma body, the Dharma body's giant hand also slowly waved. Chants sounded from the giant hand, and a Buddhist seal flashing with brilliant Buddhist light gradually took shape between the Dharma body's hands. Vajra Buddhist seal. Siai Hui raised her eyebrows and exclaimed in a low voice. Grandmaster Guzhan is a Buddhist Dharma protector? He, Grandmaster Guzhan, holds a demon-subduing pestle and has a tall and sturdy figure. If he's not a Buddhist Dharma protector, then what is he? Xin smiled. However, Grandmaster Guzhan's Vajra Buddha Dharma body is actually so powerful. This is beyond my expectations. Amitba, as a Dharma protector, one's heart has sunk into oblivion. This life of cultivation can't be brought into the cycle of reincarnation. It can be considered a life of illusion. Buddhist Dharma protectors have always been respected. Grandmaster Guzhan is willing to sacrifice himself for others. This little monk truly admires you. Siai Hui couldn't help but sigh. Guzhan activated his willpower and struck the alms bowl with Vajra Buddha seals. The alms bowl grew larger and the chants became louder and more hurried. It was as if thousands of Buddhas were chanting at the same time on the Four Extremities Mountain. Withdraw. When the alms bowl grew to over 100 feet in size, Guzhan's Dharma body raised his hand as if he was stretching. He grabbed the alms bowl and exerted force with his arms. The alms bowl slowly flipped over in the air with its mouth facing downward. Guzhan's hands left the alms bowl and formed another Buddha seal. As the seal fell, the alms bowl flashed with Buddhist light as if it was breathing. Then, a faint golden Buddhist light rushed out of the alms bowl and landed on a huge lake in the shape of a fan. The lake was rippling with blue waves, but when the blue water touched the Buddhist light, it immediately flew out of the lake. The alms bowl sucked the water in the lake and like a dragon drinking water. Xiao Hua saw that there were other places covered by Buddhist light in the deep pool, and the water was being sucked away at a speed visible to the naked eye. He was puzzled and blurted out, Senior Marshal Brother Siai Hui, this old monk. Oh, that's not right. What is Grandmaster Guzhan doing? Of course he's absorbing water. Xin smiled. I'm not old yet. Can I see it? Chapter 34:13. Xiaohua rolled his eyes at Xin and said, Do you think I don't have eyes? Can't you see that he's absorbing water? The question is, why is he absorbing water? Siai Hui was also somewhat puzzled, but he hesitated for a moment and said tentatively, Perhaps the place where Grandmaster came from encountered a drought, so he's transporting the water here to other places to relieve the drought. At this point, Siai Hui seemed to have realized something and sped up her speech. Oh, that's right. Perhaps Grandmaster Siai Hui wants to take away all of the water in the Four Extremes Mountains to investigate the destruction of the Four Extremes Mountain. By investigating, he might be able to find traces of that Taoist expert. There's so much water in the Four Extremes Mountains. Could it be that Master Guzhan has Grandmaster Siai Hang's water bottle? Xin was somewhat disdainful. I don't think he can take it all with his alms bowl alone. Xin sanding you. You're underestimating the Sumeru Buddhist formation of our Buddhism sect. Siai Hui smiled. Grandmaster Guzhan's alms bowl may not be as good as Grandmaster Siai Hui's water bottle, but the Four Extremes Mountains are only a few dozen miles wide. It's not a problem. If that's the case, then that's the best. Hearing this, Xin beamed with joy. Her eyes flashed with a strange expression as she looked at the places where the alms bowl passed. The Buddhist light sucked away the deep ponds and ravines. After 4 hours, Guzhan finally absorbed all the water in the Four Extremes Mountains into the alms bowl. The alms bowl didn't change much, but Guzhan's Vajra Buddha Dharma body had shrunk by more than half, and even his Buddhist light had dimmed a lot. Guzhan looked around with satisfaction and pointed at the alms bowl. The alms bowl fell back into the purple-haired ho's mouth, but he didn't withdraw his Dharma body. He stepped on a Buddhist cloud and headed toward one of the Four Extremes Mountains. It seems that's all there is to it. Xiaohua saw that Guzhan was very serious. He first released his Buddha's consciousness, then used his naked eyes to examine carefully. He even dropped clouds in some places. He grabbed some gravel and other things from the ground or stone walls to examine carefully. He couldn't help but nod inwardly. Xiantanua. Seeing that Gujan was ignoring them, Xiaohua said, "There's no longer anyone here, so you can't borrow the magic weapon you want. This little monk does not have much time. If it's possible, shall we leave now?" Senior brother Ci, Huey's teachings have not been in vain, since this little monk is able to lend you a helping hand. Don't worry, Xian smiled. That place is very dangerous. The three of us only have a 40% chance of success. And Venerable Master Fontien's magic weapon was the nemesis of one of those dangerous situations. Now that we haven't found Venerable Master Heaven Flipping, Heaven has sent us Master Gujan. With Master Gujan, our chances of success have increased by 20%. Speaking of this, Xian looked at Ci Hui embarrassedly and said, "Immortal friend Ci Hui, before I only thought about the Tao sect's heaven-flipping man and the Buddhist sect-related things should be given to you. Now that we have Master Gujan." It's fine." Ci Hui smiled and waved her hand. "Didn't I say it just now? To be able to gain enlightenment of the Buddhist Dharma through experience is much more precious than any Buddhist weapon left behind. Besides, if this little monk coveted some Buddhist weapon, why would I invite Junior Brother Deepu? If Grandmaster Gujan is of some help to you, you can invite him. This little monk does not mind." "AI, many thanks, immortal friend Ci Hui." Xian sighed. "This way, I feel that I have wronged you." How about this, apart from the immortal weapons and the Buddhist weapon promised to Master Gujan? As long as you like something, you can have the priority to choose. Ci Hui shook her head. "It's useless to say so much now. You should think about how to persuade Grandmaster Gujan. He might not be interested in this matter." Rest assured, immortal friend." Xian smiled and said, "I have a 40% chance of persuading ordinary Buddhist experts. Since Master Gujan is a Buddhist sect guardian, I have a 60% chance of inviting him to help." That's true." Ci Hui nodded. "Buddhist sect guardians are highly skilled. The ancient treasure that Grandmaster Tanyu mentioned is very attractive to Buddhist sect guardians. Since this little monk can go, Grandmaster Gujan can naturally go as well. Now, we only have to see if Grandmaster Gujan needs to return to the temple to report. If time is too tight, I'm afraid it won't be possible." Xian expressed her concern. "Immortal friend, Xiaohua at the side spoke. Since Grandmaster Gujan is here, does this little monk not need to go? This little monk really has something to do. Little monk, whether you go or not has nothing to do with me." Xian pursed her lips and smiled. "You can ask your senior brother Ci Hui." "Senior brother?" Xiaohua opened his mouth, but when he saw Ci Hui's smiling face, he immediately shut his mouth. He already knew the answer. He just muttered, "Forget it, just pretend this little monk didn't say anything." Xiaohua understood in his heart that Ci Hui pulled him to that place for his own good. Previously, Ci Hui wanted to explain Buddhist principles and Buddhist scriptures to Xiaohua so that his Buddhist cultivation and Buddhist sect's magical power could match, so that he wouldn't walk the path of only practicing magical power and not understanding Buddhist doctrine. Later, when he saw that Xiaohua's Buddhist sect's magical power was not inferior to his, he even wanted to help Xiaohua. He wanted Xiaohua to gain something from this trip, so he even vaguely gave Xiaohua half of the Buddhist weapons in the dangerous place. Now, it was even better. With Gujan, the guardian of the Lotus Realm, although Xiaohua might gain less benefits, it was also a lot safer. Ci Hui naturally wouldn't let him go. Jiang Luer's matter can be considered to have reached the point where it can be solved. Haste makes waste. I'd better take one step at a time. Perhaps with Ci Hui's recommendation, I don't need to worry about it. That Jinshan Temple's great Zen master, Ji Kong, will agree to awaken Jiang Luer from the Nirvana realm, right? Gujan's inspection was very detailed. Half a day passed very quickly. Seeing the full moon rising, There was no other movement in the entire Four Poles Mountain except for the sound of wind. The usual birds, chirping, and cicadas at the foot of the mountain were also gone. Xiaohua didn't care about it at first, but after a while, he understood that this situation was probably caused when Lord Fantion fell. The cultivator, who was also a disciple of Taoism, was ruthless. Not only did he kill Lord Fantion, but all the creatures near the Four Poles Mountain were also affected. Alas, Xiaohua sighed for no reason, just like a real disciple of Tantric Buddhism. "Why haven't you all left yet?" A slightly tired voice sounded. Monk Guzhan had already retracted his Dharmakaya. He sat cross-legged on the back of the purple-haired Ho and slowly flew over. Under the moonlight, his bright eyes were obviously more gentle than before. Ci Hui took a few steps forward and said respectfully, "Our cultivation is shallow, so we can't help Grandmaster with anything. But without Grandmaster's order, we dare not leave without permission." "Cultivation base is shallow? Haha, little monk, you're belittling yourself." The purple-haired Ho had already flown to the front of the crowd. Guzhan jumped down from his mount and looked at Ci Hui from head to toe. He said lightly, "The realm of the bright eyes is a watershed. It's not a place that ordinary Buddha can enter. Little monk, you can have your current cultivation because of the root of wisdom planted early. This old monk can't compare with you." "I don't dare. Compared to Grandmaster, I'm still far behind." Ci Hui hurriedly lowered her head and put her palms together. "Everyone has their own fate." Guzhan said lightly, "This old monk envies you all for cultivating Buddhism in peace. You can enter the cycle of reincarnation and don't have to be stained with karma. Yes, Grandmaster and other Buddhist protectors subdued devils and demons for our Buddhism. They protect the peace of our Buddhism and the safety of our Buddha. This is what we should respect." Ci Hui said carefully, "Master, did you find anything?" Seeing that the scene was a bit cold, Xinxin hurriedly asked and led to the main topic. However, Guzhan didn't answer Xinxin. Instead, he looked at Xiaohua and asked, "Your Buddhist name is Tipu and you claim to be a disciple of Shaolin Long Temple. How come this old monk has never heard of this temple? You just entered our Buddhism and you're actually also in the realm of the bright eyes. Could it be that you're also walking the path of a protector?" Xiaohua put his palms together and said with a smile, "The Shaolin Long Temple that disciple mentioned is a small temple in the mountains. It's normal that Grandmaster hasn't seen it. As for whether disciple is walking the path of a protector, disciple doesn't know. But these few days, I've been talking about Buddhism with senior brother Ci Hui. I haven't heard him talk about it. It shouldn't be." "Grandmaster," Ci Hui hurriedly explained, "junior brother Tipu has deep roots in wisdom. He hasn't entered our Buddhism, but he's already cultivated to the realm of the bright eyes. He's also quite accomplished in the cultivation of Buddhism. It's just that he hasn't been fated to enter our Buddhism. Just a few days ago, when he was shaving in the Shaolin Long Temple of the Great Snow Mountain, disciple saw the corpse of the Shaolin Long Temple with his own eyes." And Guzhan nodded and didn't comment. He looked at Xin and said, "Benefactress is a Confucian cultivator. Why are you so concerned about Fantian's death? If you don't have any secrets, can you tell this old monk? This one doesn't care about the life and death of a Taoist disciple." Xin said with a smile, "This one is just a little curious. If Grandmaster doesn't want to say it, then don't say it. Actually, it's nothing." Xin didn't want to listen anymore. Guzhan said, "This old monk doesn't dare to judge whether Fantion has fallen or not. However, from the traces of the battle in the Four Extremes Mountain, it should be a Taoist cultivator whose cultivation is far superior to Fantian's. The battle between the two involved the entire Four Extremes Mountain and even affected the weather for hundreds of miles around the Four Extremes Mountain. Cultivation far superior to Fantion? Who is this person? Where did he come from?" Xin was flabbergasted. Fantion is already at the third stage of the fourth grade of elemental energy, right? If his cultivation is far superior to Fantian's, doesn't that mean he's at the fifth stage of elemental energy? There are very few Taoist cultivators of this level in the 3 continents. This is not something this old monk knows. Guzhen shook his head slightly. His words surprised Xiaohua. This old monk only came to warn Fantion. Since he's no longer here, this old monk will investigate this place clearly. I only need to return to the temple and report. That person's strength should be much stronger than this old monk. How can this old monk offend him? Chapter 34:14. The more Xiao Hua thought about it, the more the drawbacks of several cultivation methods began to show. Now, it was merely a conflict of ideas. Perhaps, in the end, the conflict between Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, demon, devil, and soul would become even more severe. Perhaps Xiao Hua's primordial spirits, which came from the same source, would even fight against each other. Seeing the confusion in Xiao Hua's eyes, C.I. Hui was delighted and said with a smile, "Now, when Tanyu came here, he first showed confusion, then thought about Tanyu's calmness along the way. This little monk knows that this must be the place Tanyu is looking for. But as for why Tanyu hesitated to send out the communication magic tool, even if this little monk didn't ask, Buddha would have told this little monk through Tanyu, right? Rather than spend this little monk's energy searching, it's better to listen to Tanyu's explanation here. Go with the flow. That's right, it's exactly like that." C.I. Huey's words made Xiao Hua's eyes light up. He couldn't help but ponder. Some things, when you don't have the power to pursue them, you can only go with the flow. Only by following the development of things can you find the root of the matter. And regardless of whether it's Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, demon, devil, or soul cultivation methods, they're all a kind of appearance. Only by finding the root of cultivation can I have the power to solve my own problem, right? Since he thought of this, Xiao Hua's mind became active again. He looked around and said with a smile, "Senior Marshal Brother C.I. Hui, you're right. This place must be the place where fellow Taoist Xin is looking for an old acquaintance. If I'm not wrong, it should be because of the great change in the scenery. Except for the 4 mountain ridges, fellow Taoist Xin doesn't dare to recognize the other places. This is why fellow Taoist Xin is hesitating now." Seeing the 2 little monks singing the same tune, Xin laughed inwardly. In fact, this kind of situation could be imagined with just a little thought. These 2 people actually said such profound words. It was said that all Buddhist disciples were eloquent. Just look at these 2 little monks in front of her, and you'll know. However, Xin only smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists are right. The Taoist cultivator living in seclusion here is called heaven flipping. Although he's only a Taoist nascent soul cultivator, with the help of his life-bound magic tool, he can reach the 5th level of origin energy realm. That's why others call him heaven flipping venerable. In addition to being a Taoist, this cultivator is also proficient in our Confucian cultivation method. I met this person by chance 100 years ago, and then we met several more times. I knew that this person was wholeheartedly focused on Tao and only wanted to cultivate. He did not want to show off and was not interested in the battle between the Taoist sect and the Buddhist sect. Not only did he not contact other Taoist cultivators, he had not even taken in a disciple. Therefore, I exchanged contact methods with him. He could be considered an old friend. This place is called the 4 Extremes Mountains. I've been here several times before. In addition to having an extremely powerful natal magic treasure, Master Heaven Flipping Master is also proficient in Taoist magic circles. The 4 Extremes Mountain itself is a large magic circle that Master Heaven Flipping Master has been operating for hundreds of years. When I visited Master Heaven Flipping Master before, I saw him demonstrate it. It's really magnificent inside, and it's not comparable to ordinary Taoist cultivators. As Xin spoke, she pointed at the 4 mountains. Now, apart from the 4 extreme mountains, which are the 4 formation cores, all traces of the formation are gone. Even the scenery of the 4 extreme mountains has completely changed. If this isn't an extremely brilliant Taoist formation, Then a huge change has occurred in the four extreme mountains. Master Heaven Flipping Master is already no longer in the four extreme mountains. This place is definitely not a Taoist, illusory formation. After Exine finished speaking, Ci Hui spoke up. This little monk has already used Buddhist perception to examine this place. These mountains and rivers are all real, and there isn't a trace of illusion at all. Junior brother Tipu, what do you think? Xiao Hua seemed to be very familiar with the title of Junior brother Tipu. He also smiled and said, "That's right. This little monk has also used Buddhist perception to examine this place. My Buddhist perception is the most observant. If there is any Buddhist formation, defensive formation, or magic circle, even if it can't be broken, it can still find a trace of a flaw. Moreover, this place is full of vitality, and there isn't a trace of pretense." Then a huge change has occurred in the four extreme mountains. It's hard to predict Master Heaven Flipping Master's life and death. A trace of gloominess flashed through Exine's eyes. She didn't know if it was because of Master Heaven Flipping Master's fate or because she had come a bad time. "Ha! Ci, we continued. The great change in the four extreme mountains is a man-made disaster, not a natural disaster. Although this little monk can't cultivate all 6 divine abilities, this little monk knows that the one who dealt with Master Heaven Flipping Master was a Taoist disciple. Master Heaven Flipping Master is most likely dead. Oh, why is fellow Taoist Ci Hui so sure?" Xin stared at Ci Hui and asked curiously. "My Buddhist faction's disciples don't know how to use Heaven Earth Origin Chi, and your Confucian faction's disciples don't know how to use Heaven Earth Origin Chi. Only Taoist faction's disciples and a few demons know how to control Heaven Earth Origin Chi." Ci Hui pointed at the rippling water below her feet and explained, "There are so many water ripples here, far surpassing other places in the surrounding 1,000 miles. It must be the result of the Heaven-Earth Origin Chi wreaking havoc. Since Master Heaven Flipping Master's cultivation is only at the 4th or 5th level of Origin Chi, he definitely wouldn't be able to cause such a huge change by himself. Only 2 cultivators who can control Heaven-Earth Origin Chi together can cause this. Moreover, the strength of the cultivator who came to deal with Master Heaven Flipping Master is even higher than him. Whether it is Taoist faction's disciples or demons, they wouldn't be as merciful as my Buddhist faction's disciples, or as magnanimous as your Confucian faction's disciples, since their method could cause such a huge disturbance and even destroy Master Heaven Flipping Master's formation, then Master Heaven Flipping Master's life and death. It's easy to guess. AI. The person who understands me is definitely not an old friend. This person is definitely my enemy." Hearing Ci Hui's explanation, Xiao Hua couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The divine abilities of my Taoist faction's cultivators mostly rely on Heaven-Earth Origin Chi. The greater the divine ability, the greater the impact it has on Heaven-Earth. When the 2 cultivators fought, the 2 of us didn't suffer any injuries, but the surrounding environment was the first to be destroyed. I didn't even notice this scene, but this Buddhist Ci Hui actually saw it so clearly and explained it so incisive. Even if I don't release my divine sense, I can still determine that what Ci Hui said is true. Xiao Hua felt a little awkward in his heart, but he said, "Io, that's not good. If Master Heaven Flipping Master falls, then wouldn't the magic tool that fellow Taoist Xian wants to borrow be lost? Then, can we still go there?" "AI, of course we have to go," Xian said bitterly. "Without Master Heaven Flipping Master's magic tool, our chances of success will be reduced by 20%. However, there isn't much time left, so I have no choice but to..." While Xian was speaking, a faint Buddhist sense swept over from the horizon and fell on the 3 people in the Four Extremes Mountain. "Oh, another Buddhist Taoist has come?" Xian raised her eyebrows and looked towards the source of the Buddhist sense. Ci Hui still had that kind of smiling expression. She glanced at Xiao Hua and said, "Just from the Buddhist sense alone, this person should have reached the Lotus Realm. which is a level higher than this little monk and junior martial brother Tipu's Bright Lotus realm. You should be our senior. Hearing Ci Hui expose his Buddhist cultivation realm, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel the corners of his eyes twitch, even though this realm was already somewhat concealed by the secret technique of soul cultivation. In his heart, he finally understood why Ci Hui only thought for a moment before agreeing when he addressed Ci Hui as senior brother when he had just shaved his head and become a monk. It turned out that Ci Hui had already discovered the secret he was trying to hide from his Buddhist awareness. Xiao Hua smiled embarrassedly and bowed. Ba, senior martial brother Ci Hui really has a great divine ability to see through this little monk's strength at a glance. This little monk was still too superficial. Looking at Ci Hui again, she said with a depressed expression, "This little monk's cultivation hasn't reached the Bright Lotus realm yet. Previously, I clearly didn't mind junior martial brother Tipu's concealment and didn't intend to expose this matter, but when it came to this matter, I couldn't help it. Fellow Daoist Ci Hui, you're the one who's superficial," XINXN said with a smile. "That little monk Tipu didn't call you senior when he saw you, nor was he particularly respectful when he spoke. It's very obvious that his Buddhist cultivation realm isn't much lower than yours or mine. Your Buddhist doctrine and Buddhist doctrine don't need to be too compatible. He doesn't understand Buddhist doctrine, so naturally, he wants to ask you for advice. Since you know that his Buddhist doctrine isn't inferior to yours, whether it's the previous tacit agreement or the current clear indication, you don't think it's too much. But your remorse has left a mark on your Bright Lotus realm. Ba, good indeed, good indeed." Ci Hui put her palms together and said with a smile, "Xintanyue is right. This little monk's body was speaking the truth, but I didn't know the meaning. Every time I was enlightened by you, I learned a lot. In that case, this little one doesn't need to give you any promise or reward for this trip." XINXN glanced at the man and beast in the distance who were already flying closer and said to Ci Hui with a smile. Ci Hui raised her head. "Xintanyue is right. This little monk has already learned a lot from Tanyue. Even if there's no promise or reward, this little monk is still willing to go." It had to be said that Ci Hui's current situation was very similar to Ci Mei's. Both of them were proficient in Buddhist doctrine, and their Buddhist supernatural powers were also extremely high. Both of them were at a bottleneck that was difficult to break through at the same time. Furthermore, they had been stuck at this bottleneck for a very long time. It was so long that they felt irritated in their hearts. At this moment, they wanted to jump out, but they lacked an effective method to break through this bottleneck. There were also thousands of distracting thoughts in their hearts that disturbed their cultivation. The contradiction in their hearts could even be described as paranoid. He could not do this, nor could he do that. Other than reciting Buddhist scriptures, there seemed to be no other safe actions. Of course, reciting Buddhist scriptures was a slow and steady path, but Ci Hui didn't want to rely on this kind of ordinary method. Like Ci Mei, he needed to find an opportunity to break through the bottleneck from the outside world. Ci Hui didn't know much about XINXIN's background, but from their previous contacts, XINXIN's behavior was more mysterious, and his speech and behavior were also elegant. In particular, the gap between Buddhism and Confucianism didn't exist in XINXIN's eyes. Therefore, Ci Hui felt that XINXIN was an old friend who could have a deeper relationship with him. This time, XINXIN sent a message to Ci Hui. Ci Hui didn't hesitate and immediately came over. On the way up the mountain, not to mention XINXIN's many reminders, even the discussion with the little monk Tipu also benefited him a lot. This really made him feel that this trip was not in vain. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.